Chapter 904. We found you in the ruins. You were in a coma at that time. Later, the rescue team sent you to the hospital. Sir, you are so lucky. You only hurt your leg. You can recover after a period of rest. After Ouyang Jie woke up, he saw that the nurse in the hospital told him a lot. However, when he heard that the castle collapsed and a large number of guests were buried alive in the cellar, he was extremely excited. He couldn't calm down. His master, Uncle Jean, who was like half a father to him, all of these left him overnight? And even Zhong Luoyue. He could not contact his master, nor could he contact Uncle Jean. Fortunately, he managed to get through to Zhong Luoyue. Ajay, listen to me. Wait for me to come to you. I am also in the hospital. This was Zhong Luoyue's words. Later, the rescue team arrived and sent a large number of wounded people to the nearest hospital. Zhong Luoyue, who successfully mixed into the crowd, was naturally sent to the hospital together with them. A lot of things happened. Before entering the large ward where Ouyang Jie was, Zhong Luoyue thought so. Later, when mixed into the crowd, Luoqiu disappeared from her and Elizabeth's eyes without being noticed. But later, she heard that a young man was sent to the hospital by helicopter and was now in a high-end single ward. Zhong Luoyue guessed that the young man was probably Luoqiu, who also mixed into the crowd. She couldn't go to that place because Zhong Luoyue could see a lot of guards from a distance. She guessed that they were the people of the Song family. Later, she received a call from Ouyang Jie. She felt somewhat lucky because she wasn't sure whether Ouyang Jie had safely escaped from the collapse. Even because of something, she didn't know whether Ouyang Jie knew everything behind Uncle Jean. What was interesting was that Zhong Luoyue found out that the people who had covered for her when she went to the manor and sent her to the hospital were also in this hospital. She had already contacted them. With some familiar people by her side, Zhong Luoyue finally felt a sense of security. You guys wait for me outside, I'll go in and see Mr. Ouyang myself. At this time, Zhong Luoyue ordered several bodyguards who were only slightly injured. She sorted out some of her thoughts and walked into the big ward. Many of the victims of the disaster were also here. In fact, the number of people who were injured was far more than those in this large ward. However, many of them only suffered minor injuries and were only bandaged and examined outside. Zhong Luoyue soon found Ouyang Jie on one of the beds. At this moment, his expression was haggard. He sat with his head lowered, but his fingers kept fiddling with his phone. It seemed that he was anxious. Fortunately, you're fine. Zhong Luoyue slowly walked in front of Ouyang Jie. He raised his head and saw that Zhong Luoyue had drawn the curtains around the bed, creating a relatively private space for the bed. Zhong Luoyue moved a chair over and sat down. Luoyue. Ouyang Jie called out with concern. Zhong Luoyue only shook her head. I'm fine. The doctor said I was just a little frightened. That's good. Ouyang Jie nodded, then quickly asked, What happened? My master and the others, really? Zhong Luoyue still shook her head. I'm not sure what happened. At the wine tasting in the cellar, I waited for you for some time, but I didn't see you. Later, I felt a little tired, so I came up. I wanted to look for you, but at this time, the castle suddenly collapsed. Not only Ouyang Jie, she also said the same thing to the people who came to investigate. Zhong Luoyue already had a plan for everything that happened in the cellar. She would never reveal anything to the outside world. This was the Song family's territory. If they wanted to find trouble, let the Song family and the local government do it. As long as they excavated, the zombie corpses under the castle would be found sooner or later. How could this happen? Ouyang Jie painfully grasped his hair. It shouldn't have collapsed. It was repaired a few years ago. How could it suddenly collapse? We can only wait for the various experts to investigate. Zhong Luoyue sighed, then suddenly said, By the way, where did you go at that time? Ouyang Jie subconsciously said, I went to the study to wait for my master, but I didn't wait. Later, Uncle Jean came to talk to me for a while. I drank a glass of wine. Then I don't know how I fell asleep. Your alcohol tolerance is not bad. Is there a problem with that glass of wine? Zhong Luoyue asked tentatively. Ouyang Jie hurriedly said, Uncle Jean is like a son to me. He won't harm me, and there is no reason for him to put drugs in the wine. I think it's probably because of the time difference, so I was really tired. But he looked confused. Zhong Luoyue didn't know whether he could convince himself with such a reason. No, I have to find my master and Uncle Jean. They are the only two relatives I have left. Ouyang Jie's expression suddenly became agitated. He struggled to get out of bed. As his leg was injured, he fell to the ground as soon as his feet touched the ground, which affected the wound. Ouyang Jie couldn't help uttering a scream. The nurse outside the curtain heard the sound and hurriedly came in. She helped Ouyang Jie to the bed with Zhong Luoyue. Sir, you can't get out of bed now. Please take care of your body, okay? The nurse's voice was like a reproach. Zhong Luoyue sighed at this time, then glanced at the wound on Ouyang Jie's leg. The wound on the knee was ruptured. At this time, the blood spread out from the gauze and dyed it red. Zhong Luoyue looked at the bright red, suddenly a little absent-minded. Her heart was itchy, and in an instant, she even had a feeling of hunger. She also seemed to have lost her hearing at this moment. She could only hear a buzzing sound reverberating in her head. Zhong Luoyue shuddered all of a sudden. He felt his body turn cold. No, let me get out of bed. I want to go find my master and the others. Ouyang Jie still insisted at this moment. Zhong Luoyue took a deep breath. Ajay, you stay here to recuperate. I'll follow up on your master and the others. Maybe they're just trapped down there. It's not necessarily the worst result. Don't worry, I'll inform you as soon as there's news. Luoyue, at this time, he only trusted her. His emotions began to slowly calm down. Zhong Luoyue comforted him a little more, then said that she was going to see the bodyguards who were injured in the car accident and sent to the hospital. She made an excuse and left. Ouyang Jie was very reluctant to leave, but he didn't have a reason to ask her to stay. He could only nod silently. The moment she lifted the curtain and went out, Zhong Luoyue looked back at Ouyang Jie. Looking at his expression, Zhong Luoyue guessed that Ouyang Jie probably didn't know the truth behind the castle, or even something very important to him. She, Karen Isher, and the others had entered Jinwu City's memories. When she left, those memories of Jinwu City surged out chaotically like a merry-go-round. Zhong Luoyue discovered some secrets. That was, Ouyang Jie was very likely to be Jinwu City's illegitimate son. This was her inference from the memories of Jinwu City, often hiding in the room to look at a photo. The photo was of a woman, but this woman's appearance reminded her of Ouyang Jie. Jinwu City's extraordinary concern for Ouyang Jie, and so on, but if Ouyang Jie was really Jinwu City's illegitimate son, why did Jinwu City abandon him and let him enter the castle to become Tu Shini's disciple? She didn't know the reason. Leave one person here to watch over Mr. Ouyang and see if he needs anything. Zhong Luoyue ordered the bodyguard outside the big ward and quickly left. She still planned to see someone. This was probably the best single ward in the hospital. It was so luxurious that it could even be called a star hotel. In the ward, Father Song sat quietly on the sofa with his eyes closed, while Song Ying silently held his arm. Gan Hong and fifth uncle stood side by side, not daring to speak. There were still the elites of the Song family outside the door, as well as the 3 Song brothers who rushed over after bandaging the wound. The doctor said that there was nothing wrong with the patient, and there were no visible injuries on his body. After a magnetic resonance examination, there were no hidden injuries. The reason for his coma was not clear, but the patient's physical condition was good. However, the fact that he didn't wake up made old Master Song very unhappy. In fact, several neurologists had been invited from all over the country and were on their way. Fifth uncle's phone suddenly rang. After he picked it up, he hurriedly whispered in father's ear, Master, eldest young master, has rushed over from the village with Mr. Blind. He said that he will arrive at the hospital in half an hour. Song Howren was gathering people in the village and preparing to return to China. After father received Song Howren's letter, he immediately notified Song Howren. Calculating the time, if they had set off at that time, they should have been back by now. Okay, I see. At this time, Song Tianyu opened his eyes and looked at Luoqiu on the bed. He suddenly said, "Old Five, did Luoqiu's eyes move just now?" They glanced at each other, and secretly shook their heads. This was probably just an illusion caused by Father Song's ardent expectations. Father Song sighed inwardly and stood up. He ordered, "Old Five, Gan Hong, stay here and watch over him. Xiao Ying, accompany Grandpa for a walk." Song Ying nodded and helped Song Tianyu to stand up. When they walked out of the door, the three Song brothers hurriedly came forward. Song Tianyu waved his hand and then said in a low voice, "You guys come with me too. Tell me everything in detail." The three Song brothers nodded. The group of people went to a pavilion in the small courtyard downstairs of the inpatient department and sat down. Song Air and Song San stood guard outside the pavilion while Song De tirelessly recounted everything that happened today. He started with the giant roulette wheel at the wine tasting party, how Song De beat Lady Eve to death, and how he finally discovered the treasure trove and the secret passage, and how he escaped with his life. Really? For Song Ying, what Song De told her was undoubtedly like something out of a fantasy story. Her face was full of disbelief. Of course. Song De nodded solemnly and then took out his phone. Old 3 took this video after the roulette wheel started. Although it's very short, it captured the whole process of that blood-sucking monster killing people. Song De placed the phone on the table so that Father Song and Song Ying could see it. Even with Father Song's decades of experience, he was moved when he saw the leech-like monster sucking people dry in the video. Song Ying was even more frightened. This naturally wasn't a clip from a movie, but something that really happened. Oh my God! Song Ying opened her mouth. She shuddered when she thought about how she was in the castle when this terrifying thing happened, and couldn't help but hug her arms tightly. "Miss Ying, there are still many things in this world that we can't explain," Song De said indifferently, "just like the internal martial arts that we martial artists cultivate. To ordinary people, it's already inconceivable. But in our eyes, this world is much bigger than what you see. I just..." Song Ying wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say. In the end, she just shook her head. If this group of monsters is really causing trouble, then is it possible that Luoqiu's current coma is actually caused by these monsters? Song Tianyu suddenly asked. Song De shook his head, indicating that he didn't know, but Song De clearly understood that while he was shocked by this supernatural event, Old Master Song was still concerned about this young Master Luoqiu. This young fellow's position in Old Master Song's heart was really astonishing. Song De might look like a burly man, but his thoughts were as deep as dust. He should be fine. Maybe he just inhaled too much of the mandala flower's scent. Suddenly, a low and deep figure came from outside the pavilion, alarming the three Song brothers at the same time. They instantly looked over and saw two people walking side by side in the night. The one on the left was the cynical Song Howren, and the one on the right was a very young man. He looked to be about 25 or 26 years old, but his hair was gray. His eyes were closed, and there was a red dot between his eyebrows. He was wearing a traditional Chinese robe and cloth shoes. He walked slowly and occasionally coughed a few times, giving off a sickly feeling. But even though his eyes were closed, he seemed to be able to see. When he moved, he didn't look like a blind person at all. "Blind man." Song De stood up and said warmly, "You're finally here, Mr. Blind." Unlike Song Da's enthusiasm, Song Tianyu was very respectful. He even stood up to welcome him. "You're here?" The reason why old Master Song was respectful was partly because this Mr. Blind was really an extraordinary person, and also because of his age. Mr. Blind was actually over 100 years old, so he was worthy of old Master Song's respect. Greetings, old Master Song. Mr. Blind walked slowly to the pavilion and cupped his fist towards Song Tianyu, giving off a good impression. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 905. Greetings, Master Song. After Mr. Blind greeted him, Father Song nodded at Song Howren and asked with concern, Mr. Blind, you just said that it was because he inhaled a lot of datura flowers. How did you know? Song Howren explained, it's like this. Actually, before we came to the hospital, we took a detour to the collapsed castle to take a look. Well, Mr. Blind requested it. He said that if there really were zombies and blood-sucking monsters, it would be very dangerous and difficult for ordinary people to deal with. Indeed. Song De smiled bitterly. I lost half my life and barely managed to kill one with the advantage of being underground. If it was an open space, I would definitely be the one to die. Mr. Blind said indifferently, fortunately, it was you who practiced martial arts. If it were Song Air or Song San, even with the advantage of the terrain, I'm afraid it would point to disaster. Father Song asked at this time, Mister, what did you find out? Mr. Blind's expression was a bit grave. That place emitted a lot of death energy. I had Howren describe the surrounding terrain and found that the castle was a naturally formed place, very suitable for raising living corpses. If it was in the hands of some people in China's Xiangjiang, it would be a treasure land for refining corpses. Therefore, it's not strange for zombies to appear. After a pause, Mr. Blind continued, however, the castle has already collapsed. Even if there are zombies, I'm afraid they're buried deep underground and won't be able to come out in a short time. But I suggest that it's best not to let the government dig casually. Once there are signs of zombies and it spreads, I'm afraid it'll be a disaster. I understand. I'll immediately contact them and have them stop digging for the time being. Song Tianyu nodded. This place was the Song family's headquarters. If a terrifying wave of zombies broke out, the Song family would be the first to bear the brunt of it. During the day, the yang energy is strong, so the zombie strength will be weakened. Mr. Blind said at this time, tomorrow, I'll go investigate carefully. Master Song, please give me some people. No problem. Mr. Blind, how many people do you need? Just let Howren know. Father Song readily agreed. In addition, before I came here, I did a rough investigation and found that there are many petals of the datura flower in the castle, and there are also remnants of their scent. At this moment, Mr. Blind added, this kind of datura flower is different from the common ones. It has a bit of hallucinogenic properties. It can cause people to hallucinate and in serious cases, it can cause people to fall into a coma. I think that since the new young master of the Song family has no external injuries, it must be because of this flower. Is there a way to save him? Father Song quickly asked. Mr. Blind said indifferently, it's nothing serious. Perhaps he'll wake up after sleeping for a day or two. Otherwise, I can prescribe some Chinese medicine to refresh the mind and boil it to drink. You should be fine. Song Ying's phone suddenly rang. She quickly picked it up and said, Grandfather, fifth uncle said that Luochio has woken up. Then, Song Ying muttered softly, didn't you say you were going to sleep for a day or two? Everyone's physique is different. Mr. Blind looked at Song Ying. It's not strange for people with good physiques to wake up early. Missing, you worry too much. Song Ying glanced at her grandfather in embarrassment, but Father Song didn't say anything. Instead, he clearly breathed a sigh of relief. Tell old Five that I'll go up and take a look later. Song Ying stuck out her tongue. At this moment, Song Tianyu suddenly said, how about this, you go up and wait for me. I have something to discuss with Mr. Blind. Song Ying didn't insist on staying. She nodded and quickly left. After that, Song Tianyu looked at Song Howren and said, Howren, leave the people I asked you to pick here first. We might have to postpone our plan to return to China. Do your best to assist Mr. in investigating this matter. This is the Song family's headquarters. We can't let anything go wrong here. Do you understand? Understood. Song Howren nodded solemnly. Mister, I have something to discuss with you in private. Song Tianyu looked at Mr. Blind and asked softly, Can you listen? Sure. Song Ying didn't immediately return to Luochio's ward. Instead, she looked around and saw that no one was following her. She put on her sunglasses and suddenly went to the back stairwell. Not long after, a nurse quietly opened the door and met up with Song Ying here. The nurse looked a little nervous. After seeing Song Ying, she took out a test tube from her uniform. No one saw it, right? Song Ying stared at the nurse and asked. The nurse quickly said, No. As per your instructions, I secretly took it out when the patient's blood was drawn for testing. Are you sure? Song Ying asked in a deep voice. Absolutely not. Okay. Song Ying nodded. Go back and do your work. I'll get someone to send the money to you later. Remember, no one else is allowed to know about this. Otherwise, you would have known. Miss Song, don't worry. I won't tell anyone. After that, the nurse left carefully. Song Ying looked at the test tube in her hand. It contained Luochio's blood. It's not that I don't trust Uncle's ability, Song Ying muttered at this time, but after all, it's related to the future of the Song family. I have to verify it myself. If you are really from the Song family, I will. Song Ying couldn't say what she would do. Finally, she pouted her lips and said, At most, I will treat you better. She put the test tube in her pocket and went to a department in the hospital. Then, she quickly walked out and hummed a song happily, walking to the VIP ward area. Unfortunately, Song Ying's good mood didn't last long. Because after a while, she met a very annoying woman, as Song Ying's sworn enemy and senior, Zhong Luoyue. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Song Ying glanced at Zhong Luoyue's embarrassed appearance at this time and suddenly frowned. Because she saw that Zhong Luoyue was holding a coat in her hand, it should be the one worn by Luochio. The reason why she couldn't be wrong was that this coat was chosen by Song Ying herself. When did this coat come to Zhong Luoyue's hands? It's strange. Also, this damn woman took this road. Is she also going to see Luochio? They met at the corner of the corridor, and then, without a word, each turned down the same road. Congratulations, I didn't bury you. Congratulations, Song Ying said with a fake smile. Zhong Luoyue didn't fall into a disadvantage. She smiled and said, Yes. In fact, I also went to the gate of hell, but Yama told me that some scourges are still alive. A good person like me should live longer, so he sent me back. Song Ying laughed happily. I'm afraid this king of hell is blind. Who knows? Zhong Luoyue also smiled. Anyway, I didn't wear sunglasses. So sneaky. Song Ying shrugged and took off her sunglasses indifferently. Then she said casually, Do you have a friend here? Yes. Zhong Luoyue suddenly handed over the coat in her hand. She lowered her head and said shyly, Please help me return this coat to my friend. Looking at the situation, I don't think I can get in. By the way, help me pass a message, saying that the time spent with him is too exciting. It's unforgettable and my blood is boiling. Song Ying was stunned. Zhong Luoyue had already stuffed the coat to Song Ying and left with her. Exciting? Unforgettable? Blood boiling? Hey, what do you mean by unforgettable? Make it clear. Zhong Luoyue, come back. Song Ying chased and asked. Come back. Zhong Luoyue just waved her hand casually with her back facing Song Ying. Damn vixen. Song Ying took the coat and slammed it on the wall. Song Ying was probably in a bad mood, but Zhong Luoyue was in a good mood. This was the happiest time of the day. She even had a feeling of returning to the normal world. But she knew that this feeling was just an illusion. Because on the way out, she happened to meet someone she knew. It was Natasha, who had formed a temporary team with her in the maze cellar and then disappeared. At this time, Natasha looked like she had lost her soul. Her head was lowered, and no one knew what she was thinking. Perhaps it was because she was too absent-minded, but she did not react in time and was knocked to the ground by a nurse who was pushing an emergency bed from behind. "Miss, do you know her?" the bodyguard next to her asked. Jean Louis shook her head, turned around and said indifferently, "I don't know her, but I met her in the castle. Let's go, I'm a little tired." She passed by Natasha in this way. Natasha, who had been knocked to the ground, was helped up by someone. She was still in a daze, but she quickly left with the emergency bed. What happened? Natasha's mind was in a mess. When she woke up, she found herself in the hospital. It was said that she was found under the rubble and was unconscious at that time. After waking up, Natasha found that she was really safe. She immediately felt relieved. But everything that happened in the castle was so clear, which made Natasha terrified. Then, Natasha found something that made her very afraid. That was, the survivors who were treated with her seemed to have forgotten what happened in the cellar. There were no more survivors, including her. It seemed that there were only 5 survivors who were found. But these 4 people had forgotten what happened in the maze. Natasha didn't dare to tell the truth, because she vaguely felt that there seemed to be a pair of invisible hands behind her, manipulating everything. The doctor suggested that she stay in the hospital for observation for a few days, and Natasha was willing to stay in such a crowded place. She was planning to pretend that she didn't know what happened if the survivors in the hospital couldn't remember anything in the next few days. She didn't want to involve herself in such a horrible thing again. Natasha stood in the same place for a while, still feeling a little dizzy. She planned to go to the bathroom to wash her face. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. There were not many people in the inpatient department of the hospital. In the bathroom, Natasha began to tear off the tape on her face in front of the mirror. Her face should be bruised. Natasha remembered that she fell on the ground in the maze. Her arm was bandaged at this time. Natasha didn't know when she got hurt, but the nurse who bandaged her told her that the wound was quite deep, a bit like a scratch. She carefully leaned in front of the mirror and began to slowly tear off the tape on her face to prevent it from getting wet when she washed her face. However, when the tape was slowly torn off, Natasha was suddenly shocked. The wound on her face had begun to rot. She found that her lips were purple, and there was a touch of blood at the bottom of her eyes, but her face was pale like a corpse. Natasha approached the mirror again in fear. She opened her eyelids with her fingers, only to see the horrifying congested state in her eyeballs. She was more frightened, and suddenly collapsed on the ground. Natasha's whole body was trembling, suddenly cold and suddenly hot, and suddenly became difficult to breathe. She seemed to remember something, and quickly took off the bandage on her arm. She saw that her arm was rotten at this time. She was frightened and wanted to ask for help. "Doctor," she shouted in fear, but at this time, a hot thing was spat out from her throat. That was her blood, spat out from her body. Her teeth, her lips, were now covered with blood. She looked at the blood on her hand in horror. Her body suddenly twitched and fell to the ground. At this time, a cleaner opened the door of the washroom and saw Natasha lying on the ground. Miss, are you okay?" The cleaner was shocked and quickly came to check. But at this time, Natasha suddenly sat up, her eyes turned white, and saw the cleaner. She instantly opened her mouth and bit him. When Song Ying pushed open the door of this VIP ward, she happened to see Gan Hong holding a cup and feeding Luoqia water. Miss Song Ying, who was not in a good mood, directly straightened her face at this time. Looking at his Mrs. appearance, Uncle Wu wondered why her face suddenly changed, but as an experienced butler, Uncle Wu said very cleverly, "Master Chiu, I'll go and see if the doctor is here. It's strange, why hasn't he come yet?" "Thank you." Luoqia nodded. Luoqia had to pretend to be a patient. If he woke up alive and well, it would probably arouse suspicion. Therefore, Luoqia cooperated with Gan Hong and Uncle Wu's care. Song Ying frowned and came to the front of the bed, sat down and crossed her legs. Tell me, what happened? What happened? Luoqiu asked curiously. Song Ying said discontentedly, Don't ask when you already know the answer. I tell you, it was you who told us to go to that room to wait for Tushini. What happened? Why did we all pass out? At this time, Luoqiu looked at Gan Hong in confusion. He looked very innocent. At this time, Gan Hong whispered in Song Ying's ear, Miss Ying, Master Chiu forgot what happened after he woke up. He only remembered what happened before playing chess with Mr. Tu in the vineyard. So Song Ying looked at Luoqiu in astonishment, blinking her eyes. Luoqiu looked at Song Ying's eyes, blinking his eyes. So what happened? You're pretending! Song Ying roared at this time. Chapter 906. Song Tianyu and Mr. Blind walked side by side on a small path in the recuperation area of the hospital. Behind them, the Song brothers and Song Haoran followed at a distance of 6 to 7 meters. Even with Song Haoran's extraordinary perception and the Song brothers' senses as martial artists, they were unable to hear the conversation between Song Tianyu and Mr. Blind. They knew that this was Mr. Blind's method. Even if they were face to face, if Mr. Blind did not wish for others to hear, no one would be able to hear it. Old Master Song, are you worried because of the chaos caused by the zombies in the ancient castle? Song Tianyu glanced at Mr. Blind and shook his head. With you around, why would I be afraid of evil? I'm just thinking about something else. Mr. Blind said, What is it? Song Tianyu stopped and looked at the stars in the distance. Mister, do you remember our meeting? Mr. Blind nodded. Of course I remember. Back then, old Master Song was being hunted down in Nanyang. I happened to be wandering around. Song Tianyu still felt that. If not for you saving me, I'm afraid I would never be able to leave Nanyang, much less build up the foundation of the Song family in this foreign country. I will never forget Sir's kindness to me. That's why I set up a family rule. All descendants of the Song family must respect you as they respect me. There's no need for that. Mr. Blind said indifferently, I've already accepted the offerings of the Song family. We can just take what we need. Song Tianyu only smiled and did not continue the topic. Instead, he suddenly looked at a tiny star in the sky and said, You once said that I have the star energy of the North Star. Do you remember? Mr. Blind said, The Song family was originally a descendant of the royal family. Song Taizu was once the son of Shinryu recognized by the heavens and earth. Even though the dynasty changed, the dragon energy of the land of China still blesses the descendants. Although the Song family has been through a lot of hardships, it has never been destroyed. The dragon energy of the land is a very mysterious fate. After a long period of hardships, it will break out of its cocoon and become a butterfly. After a few cycles, it will definitely give birth to a rich and noble person. Old Master Song, you are that person. Song Tianyu suddenly sighed and said worriedly, What will happen to the Song family after I die? Mr. Blind said, Miss Song Ying is blessed with wealth. She will have no worries for the rest of her life. As for young Master Song's talent, he has his own opportunities. You don't have to worry. What about the descendants of my elder brother? Song Tianyu suddenly asked. All these years, I have been painstakingly searching for news of my elder brother and his descendants. It was only because Mr. told me that my elder brother's bloodline had not been cut off that I persevered. But more than a year ago, you told me that fate was in chaos. You could no longer divine the existence of that descendant. I was in despair several times. Mr. Blind said, This humble one is still unable to divine his existence to this day. Whether he exists or doesn't exist, to say nothing of fate, even the slightest trace of his existence is incomparably obscure to the mysteries of heaven. Sir, you mean we may have found the wrong person? Song Tianyu frowned. Mr. Blind shook his head and said, Not necessarily. Fate and the mysteries of the heavens were illusory things. On the contrary, modern science had its merit. What could be proven by science, ancient methods might not be able to. And recently, the Song clan's luck has suddenly increased greatly for some reason, vaguely being protected by the power of heaven and earth. I reckon that it should be the return of the descendant of Master Song's elder brother. Power of heaven and earth? Song Tianyu was taken aback. Mr. Blind fell silent for a moment before saying in a deep voice, "This humble one has said that the Song clan is the descendant of Shinryu's son of heaven. Even though the dynasty has changed, this supreme position that was once recognized by heaven and earth is still hidden in the fate of the Song clan's descendant. The Song clan's luck has suddenly increased greatly, and the increase is something I have never seen before. I'm afraid that this supreme heaven and earth aura will come from the Song clan's descendant that we found." "Sir, are you saying that Luochio, he has the fate of Shinryu's son of heaven?" Song Tianyu gaped in shock. "In today's world, there is no such thing as a dynasty." Mr. Blind shook his head again. "Whether one can transform into a dragon and stand at the pinnacle of mortals, there are still many unfathomable factors. Furthermore, I have yet to meet this Master Chiu personally, so I don't dare to make any assertions. But there is one thing that this humble one can be sure of. The Song clan's sudden increase in luck will cause the luck of everyone related to the Song clan to increase greatly. Even I have a feeling that this is due to luck. Perhaps the entire Song clan will advance further because of this. The pinnacle of aristocratic families was already the pinnacle of aristocratic families. If the pinnacle of aristocratic families advanced further, Song Tianyu's gaze instantly turned solemn. That would be the realm of the nation. This is an important matter. I will keep it a secret." Song Tianyu pondered for a moment. "I was originally a little hesitant, but after listening to your words, I suddenly see the light. I have already made up my mind." As if he knew what Song Tianyu was thinking, Mr. Blind suddenly said, "Old Master Song, there is no need to be too anxious. There will always be a time when a person's strength is limited. Fate is fleeting and the winds and clouds change. It is better to plan carefully before taking action. I will follow your advice." Song Tianyu nodded. In the dark night, a scream suddenly came from the hospital. At the same time, it alarmed Song Tianyu and Mr. Blind, who were having a secret conversation. Naturally, the Song brothers and Song Haoran were also involved. "I wonder if Miss Ying's temper will embarrass young Master Chiu." Fifth uncle walked in the corridor of the inpatient department of the hospital with his hands behind his back. Later, he came to a conclusion: it was better to leave the younger generation's matters to them. Old people shouldn't worry too much. But what made Uncle Wu feel strange was that when Luochio woke up, he had already called through the pager at the head of the bed. However, not only the doctor, but also the nurse didn't show up for a long time. Was the hospital so busy tonight? Maybe it was because they were busy dealing with the wounded sent from the castle by the rescue team? Uncle Wu knocked on the door of the duty room, but he didn't see anyone. Uncle Wu frowned in confusion. Suddenly, he heard some strange sounds coming from under a table in the duty room. Out of curiosity, Uncle Wu slowly walked towards the table. "What's the matter?" Unexpectedly, at this moment, someone's voice suddenly came from behind. Fifth uncle quickly turned around and saw a slightly tired young doctor. Uncle Wu said indifferently, "Nothing, I just pressed the pager but didn't see anyone, so I came to see in person." The young male doctor glanced at the duty room randomly and said, "Maybe they are too busy, so they transferred the people here. Which ward is it? I'll go and see right away." "Ward A01. The young doctor was stunned and then nodded quickly. "Sir, wait for me for a moment. I'll put something down and then go there right away. Is that okay?" He knew that the identity of the person who lived in this ward was definitely not simple, because this was the best ward in the hospital. Uncle Wu nodded. "Okay, then I'll go back first." The young doctor hurriedly agreed and watched as fifth uncle slowly walked away. The young doctor breathed a sigh of relief and then rubbed his eyebrows. He was so busy tonight that he didn't even have time to eat dinner. He had been hungry for a long time, however. He still wanted to go to Ward A01 and get something to eat when he came back. He poured a glass of water and planned to look for the medical record after drinking it and then go there. However, when the young doctor was drinking water, he suddenly heard a strange sound behind him, which made him turn around curiously. The sound seemed to come from behind a desk in the corner in front of him. The young doctor frowned and walked over step by step with the glass of water. However, when he walked to a position where he could see, he found nothing. The chair just moved a little, and then some documents fell to the ground. The young doctor shook his head and thought that he might be too tired. He walked over, bent over to pick up the documents on the ground and put them back on the table. Then, he glanced at a photo on the table. This was the position of his colleague, and the photo was taken with his girlfriend at the same time. The young doctor smiled. He really wanted to have a girlfriend. Such a thought suddenly rose in his heart, but the doctor's time was too busy. He was completely free to die, but he didn't have time to get sick. He looked at it with self-mockery and turned around. However, at this moment, he was suddenly startled. It was his colleague. At the same time, he lowered his head at this moment, and his body trembled slightly. The young doctor sighed at this time. "I was scared to death by you." He patted his colleague's shoulder casually, but his colleague still lowered his head and remained motionless. "What's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well? Jack? Are you all right?" The young man called out again. At this time, his colleague Jack suddenly raised his head. His face was pale, his eyeballs were rolled up, and his mouth was suddenly opened. "Ah!" The paper cup fell to the ground, and the water that hadn't been drunk spilled all over the floor. Zhong Luoyue didn't go back to see Ouyang Jie immediately, but came to a separate ward. She asked the bodyguards to stay outside the door and walked in alone. Of course, this ward was not as well guarded as the one with the best conditions, but it was already one of the best in the hospital. The one in the ward was not a patient, but a girl who seemed to be suffering from albinism. When Zhong Luoyue knocked on the door and entered, the girl was standing by the window, looking at the distance obliquely. Zhong Luoyue felt that she should have heard her coming in, so she didn't ask abruptly, but directly asked, "Is this the direction of your home?" The girl turned around. Elizabeth. Elizabeth looked at Zhong Luoyue and said, "My grandfather told me that after this hunting day, we won't go home first. Instead, we'll go to the Mediterranean Sea. That's where my mother grew up." She lowered her head. Although she was smiling, she couldn't help but feel heartache. She whispered, "Grandpa said that I have few opportunities to walk outside, so I take this opportunity to travel a little. I'm actually looking forward to it." Zhong Luoyue patted Elizabeth's shoulder. "Your grandpa will be very happy to see you can walk freely now." Because of a telepathic trip, Zhong Luoyue's memory was also entangled with Elizabeth's past. Because of this entanglement, even though she had not really met Amand, Zhong Luoyue felt a sense of sadness in her heart that did not belong to her, but it was very real. She and Elizabeth had only known each other for half a day, but they were like good friends who had accompanied each other for half their lives, a very strange thing. "What are your plans after this?" Zhong Luoyue suddenly asked. Elizabeth shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe I'll walk around and see the outside world, or maybe I'll go back to my house and deal with some things. In fact, I don't know if I can deal with these things well. These things used to be taken care of by my grandpa, and I've been sleeping most of the time." Although Elizabeth was a mixed blood that was not popular among vampires, her father was indeed a purebred vampire when he was still alive, and he had many properties. Zhong Luoyue thought for a while and said, "Why don't you stay with me for the time being?" Elizabeth looked at Zhong Luoyue. "I'm actually doing this for myself," Zhong Luoyue said seriously. "In my current situation, if I don't have an elder by my side, I'll feel very uneasy. Maybe you feel that this is too much, but at least I can guarantee that I can give you a lot of help and help you deal with your family's properties. Of course, I don't have any intention of coveting these properties. Elizabeth shook her head. Your family is much richer than me. I'm not worried about this. Because of our telepathic trip, our memories are entangled and now we're like family. I'm very willing to help you. However, I still want to go to my mother's hometown first. At least, next to my mother's grave, I'll arrange a place for my grandpa. Of course, Zhong Luoyue was immediately overjoyed. I'll go with you, I'll take care of you. She was a little nervous at first, not knowing if Elizabeth would agree to her request, but she didn't expect that Elizabeth would actually agree so readily. As a newborn vampire, the death of her elder lady Eve made her feel lonely and helpless all the time. Now that she had a kindred by her side, she naturally felt more at ease. As for how to face the Zhong family in the future, Zhong Luoyue planned to take this opportunity to accompany Elizabeth to the Mediterranean Sea and carefully consider it, giving herself some time to think. In that case, you can just call me Yu in the future, Zhong Luoyue said with a smile. This is the name that only my family calls me. Yu. Elizabeth smiled slightly, and her expression relaxed a little, less gloomy. But at this moment Elizabeth frowned and looked at the door of the ward. What's wrong? Zhong Luoyue asked curiously. Elizabeth said with a serious expression, I smell the smell of corpses, and there's a lot of them. With that, the door of the ward was suddenly knocked open, and a bodyguard fell to the ground, and a middle-aged man wearing a cleaner's uniform was lying on top of the bodyguard. The cleaner was biting the bodyguard's neck. This scene left a deep impression on Zhong Luoyue, because this was the scene she saw in the castle's cellar maze, the scene of zombies eating people. How could this be? How could there be zombies in the hospital? Zhong Luoyue retreated in horror. I'm afraid that some of the survivors have been infected. Elizabeth frowned. At this moment, the zombie cleaner suddenly raised his head and opened his bloody mouth. Elizabeth's lips moved, revealing two fangs, opened his mouth, and let out a low growl. Chapter 907. The zombie cleaner, who was already immersed in the pleasure of devouring fresh flesh and blood, did not know that when he lowered his head to bite the bodyguard's flesh again, Elizabeth quickly walked towards him. If there was no special stimulus, zombies, the living dead would not have much reaction to vampires. For example, the zombies that attacked the vampires in the underground maze of the castle were only special circumstances. It was because Karen Isher was controlling them behind the scenes. At this time, Elizabeth had already walked directly in front of the zombie cleaner. Her palm quickly swept across, and the zombie's head was directly cut off and fell to the ground. Decapitation. This cruel method made Zhong Luoyue feel a little uncomfortable, but she did not say anything. She even adapted quickly. She understood that this kind of living dead zombies, if their heads were not destroyed, they would only be endless. Elizabeth turned around and said, This hospital is full of the smell of corpses. I am afraid that many people have turned into zombies. Zhong Luoyue asked nervously, Elizabeth, are these zombies really like in the movies? Whoever bites will become a zombie. Elizabeth shook her head and said, I don't know what happened to those movies you mentioned. Watching movies is a waste of time for me. But generally speaking, some people will not be turned into zombies even if they are bitten because of their physique. But after all, it is only a small number. That is already an immeasurable disaster, if it really breaks out. Zhong Luoyue frowned. Elizabeth nodded and said, Yes, if humans become zombies, vampires will not be able to get fresh blood. Generally speaking, zombies can live for about 50 years. This seems to be the limit. Their bodies will continue to decay when exposed to the air, and finally completely decay. But if they are preserved well and the decay is slowed down, they can live for 100 years or even longer. For example, some of the underground parts of the castle should have been sealed hundreds of years ago. Zhong Luoyue suddenly said, If I'm saying if the whole world is invaded by zombies, what will the world become like? Elizabeth said seriously. Someone in the 13 ancient clans has proposed this question a long time ago. They have also made some calculations. If by that time there are no more living creatures in the world other than the undead, then after all the undead die of natural causes, we will probably welcome a completely dead world, returning to the beginning of the world before life was born. The apocalypse and the cleansing of the world are nothing more than natural disasters and man-made disasters. In theory, zombies are a kind of man-made disaster. Zhong Luoyue didn't know what the Book of Revelation was, but she didn't have time to care about it. During this short conversation, another zombie slowly walked by the door. She glanced at Elizabeth, who was very decisive. When we meet zombies, we either control them or kill them all. The 13 clans have never had a third policy towards zombies. Controlling zombies not only requires a special method, but also a special talent. There are not many vampires with this kind of talent, so we basically kill them when we see them. After all, zombies are the same as humans to us. They are the root cause of the extinction of our race. Zhong Luoyue didn't say anything, but quickly nodded, and then picked up the guns from the dead bodyguards. Elizabeth said that she had become a vampire, and sooner or later she would awaken her own special ability. However, there was no set time limit, so to Zhong Luoyue, these modern weapons gave him a greater sense of security. I think my shooting skills are not out of practice. Zhong Luoyue took a deep breath, hung the gun bag on her waist, and rushed out of the door. The gun was aimed at the back of the zombie that walked by. One shot to the head. Bang! Bang 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 bang! In addition to the screams, there were continuous sounds of gunfire, which made Song Ying, who was questioning Luochio, suddenly change her expression. Gan Hong was the first to react. The moment the anomaly occurred, she quickly moved to the side of the window. At the same time, she pulled out a silver M9 pistol and stuck her head out to look. What did you see? Song Ying had already stood up. Gan Hong shook her head and said, I don't know, but someone ran out downstairs. The shooter is the police. At this moment the door of the ward opened, and an elite bodyguard of the Song family looked panicked. Missing, please leave with me as soon as possible. Outside there are, what? Zombies. The man finally said in horror. As he spoke, he heard a blood-curdling scream from outside the door. He saw a guard of the Song family being thrown to the ground in an instant, screaming in horror and screaming in pain. This scene shocked everyone who saw it. Song Ying was shocked because less than half an hour ago, she had seen the video of zombies on Song Da's phone. Now, the zombies had appeared in front of her, alive and well. Seeing it through the screen and seeing it with her own eyes was naturally a different feeling, which made her hair stand on end. Luochio was not shocked, but slightly frowned. The real Luochio and the fake Luochio did not switch for long. He stayed in the vineyard with Yu Yi for a while, and thought it was time to switch back. In other words, when he was not in the hospital, there was a zombie disaster in the hospital, but he did not know where the source of the zombie disaster in the hospital was. Luochio instantly closed his eyes, and his consciousness was so strong that it shrouded the hospital in an instant, as if a pair of eyes were everywhere. Why are you still standing there? Are you scared? Luochio suddenly felt his body being pulled, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that Song Ying had already grabbed his arm and pulled it hard with a panicked look. Go! Master Chiu just woke up. I am afraid that his body is not well. Let me carry him. Gan Hong quickly said at this time. I will do it myself. Luochio shook his head. At this time, several bodyguards of the Song family outside the door had already completely killed the zombie that appeared. They almost turned the zombie into a hornet's nest. Missing, we have contacted the master. The first bodyguard who came in at this time hurriedly said, Master and the others also encountered zombies, but with the young master and Mr. Song, they are temporarily safe. Master has already asked the young master to come and pick us up. Got it. Song Ying nodded. After the initial panic, Song Ying was able to quickly calm down, not to mention Gan Hong, who was always calm. Although she was shocked, she was not flustered at all. It had to be said that the Song family was very good at training their descendants and subordinate. Probably they will have a good life, if it does not involve supernatural matters. Luochio's heart flashed such a thought. For him, to understand his father's background was basically equivalent to completing his initial goal. It was just that Yu Yi had recently completed a big business deal, which gave him plenty of time to extend this holiday. When Luochio got up, Gan Hong had already squatted down and put the slippers in front of his feet, as if she was going to help him put them on. This Song family's training is a bit too good. What kind of standard is this training based on, Master Chiu? What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Gan Hong raised her head and asked with concern. It's nothing. Luochio shook his head. Gan Hong did not really help him put on the slippers, but quickly turned her head to look outside the door. She was still wearing the dress when she participated in the wine tasting at the castle. She directly tore the part below the skirt and took off the high heels. This was almost a perfect leg shape, but there was a scar of more than 10 centimeters on the outside of the thigh. Miss Master, I will go over there to explore. You wait for me here. At this time, the guard hurriedly walked to the side of the corridor. At this time, Gan Hong found a black pistol from the body of the dead guard and directly put it in Luochio's hand. Master Chiu, please take this. The gun was not cold, it was still warm. This guard did not have time to take it out before he died. Seeing that Luochio seemed to be unable to react, Gan Hong did not say anything and directly went to Luochio's back, sticking close to his body, and then held Luochio's hands, 10 fingers entwined with Luochio's palms. Suddenly, this made Luochio have a strange feeling, probably from the contact of the opposite sex. Hold it like this, then aim. When pulling the trigger, use a little strength with your index finger. Gan Hong quickly said. There will be a little impact, so relax your wrist, and then do this. Remember, when not shooting, the muzzle should point to the ground to avoid misfire. Cough cough. Song Ying at this time suddenly coughed twice. Gan Hong turned back in an instant and took a step back. Then, she lowered her head slightly. Thank you for your guidance. Luochio smiled. I think I won't have a chance to shoot, but I will still hold it. Cough cough. Song Ying suddenly coughed twice. Luochio said, Song Ying, aren't you comfortable? Let's go. You are always so slow and lukewarm. Do you want to become a zombie? Song Ying was curious. Maybe it was because she was too concerned. Bah! This way. Who has come back? Song Ying pointed to the other direction outside the door. Who was the name of the guard who went to explore the way. Gan Hong nodded, grabbing Luochio's hand and walking out quickly. It felt good to be protected by someone. But Luochio didn't enjoy this new feeling at the moment. Instead, he was thinking about something else. Zombies were the living dead, and the living dead didn't have souls. Because of the extreme panic brought about by the zombie disaster, the club was bound to have a steady stream of business, just like the desperate prayers of the hostages in the opera house. Because the number of hostages reached a certain level, it directly triggered the transaction mechanism. Of course, it was also because the boss was there at that time. But this model wasn't what Luochio wanted to see, even the club didn't want to see. If the whole world became the living dead, then those precious things would disappear. The club would also face an awkward situation, that was, there would be no business to do. So there is still a situation where even if they weren't offended, they should take the initiative to attack. Luochio lowered his head and murmured. He suddenly remembered the conversation with Blackwater. The club's position was always on the customer's side, and it wouldn't be partial to anyone. But in this case, it would take the initiative to come to the non-customer's side. Or was this just Luochio's own position? There was always a cold light hanging beside Mr. Blind. If one looked carefully, he would find that it was a short sword about the length of an arm, a bronze sword. The bronze sword seemed to have a mind of its own, moving around Mr. Blind and Song Tianyu all the time. When a zombie rushed over, this cold light would immediately shoot out like lightning and cut off the zombie's head. The legendary sword Immortal was only vaguely mentioned in the ancient books as a cultivation system. Songda didn't see Mr. Blind fight many times, but every time he saw him, he would be very envious. This was another level of life that warriors could never come into contact with. He didn't have time to tell Mr. Blind about the ancient scripture he got from the treasure house of the ancient castle. He even wanted to tell Mr. Blind now. After smashing a zombie's head with a slap, Songda quickly returned to Song Tianyu and Mr. Blind's side. Master is also Song Air and Song San. It should be about time to meet Miss Ing and the others. Master, don't worry. Song Tianyu glanced around. This was the lobby of the inpatient department. There were many corpses around. These were the patients who escaped from the ward but were bitten to death by zombies. I hope so. Although he was secretly anxious, Song Tianyu also understood that he shouldn't go too deep. This would only make his side more burdensome in order to protect him. Strange, why did these zombies suddenly become quiet? Songda frowned at this moment. A few patients who had just stood up and turned into zombies turned around and walked towards the same direction, as if they were not interested in the fresh food in front of them. Songda hurriedly looked at Mr. Blind, but saw that Mr. Blind just frowned and didn't say anything. Looking at the situation, he didn't know why. They seem to be quiet. Where are they going? Not only Master Song's side, on the other side of the hospital, Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue also encountered the same situation. But different from Song Tianyu's side, who directly fought with zombies, they almost slaughtered their way here. Zombies were like stationary targets to vampires. Are they attracted by something? Elizabeth pondered for a moment, then suddenly said, "This may be a good thing. If they are attracted by something and gather together, then the chances of them escaping from the hospital will be greatly reduced. This can minimize their threat to the greatest extent." Suddenly, Zhong Luoyue and Elizabeth looked at each other. They both thought of a possibility, a person who had the ability to gather zombies. Chapter 908. Despite the speculation in their hearts, whether this matter was true or not, for Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue, it was not the most important thing. Because the movement of the zombies at the moment undoubtedly created a good opportunity for them. If these zombies were all gathered together, then it would be much more convenient to kill them, and there would be no need to worry about the fish that escaped the net. Because she had already become a vampire, she would not be attacked by zombies. Zhong Luoyue had already killed several zombies along the way, and now she had entered a state that she could not explain. Probably for killing, it was a hidden factor in everyone's heart. But at this time, Zhong Luoyue's phone suddenly rang. It was a call from Ouyang Jie. On the other side of the phone, Ouyang Jie's voice sounded very anxious, saying that he encountered a guy that bit people randomly, just like a zombie. "It's good that you are okay." In the public ward, Ouyang Jie leaned on the left side of the bed, feeling the cold floor. While he was contacting Zhong Luoyue, he looked down at his leg. There was a bloody wound on his leg. The pain made him frown. This was originally the place where he was crushed when the castle collapsed, and now it was fiercely bitten a few times. At this time, Ouyang Jie simply clamped the phone with his neck, then took a bandage from the bedside table and began to bandage it. In his mind, he could not help but recall the thrilling and frightening scene a few minutes ago. For Ouyang Jie, Tushini and Uncle Kim's life and death were unknown. He naturally could not sleep peacefully. When he was slightly irritated, suddenly a scream came from outside the curtain. Before Ouyang Jie could react, he saw a figure suddenly rushed into the curtain around his bed, attacking him like a patient with rabies, and biting the wound on his leg. Ouyang Jie's leg was injured, and it was difficult for him to move, so he could only struggle on the bed. But for some reason, this thing, suddenly quieted down, did not continue to attack him, and even took the initiative to leave. Ouyang Jie opened the curtain in horror, only to see the beds in the public ward. On the floor, there were patients who were brutally killed. Most of their bodies were bitten into many bloody places. Ouyang Jie believed that he was not having a terrible nightmare, but a plot that only happened in movies, at this time really appeared in front of his eyes. "Are you really okay? Are you hurt?" Zhong Luoyue asked with slight concern at this time. Ouyang Jie said casually, "It's not a big problem, but it's not convenient for me to move. And your bodyguard is dead, right in front of me. I can't do anything." "Everyone can't do anything. Now is not the time to blame yourself," Zhong Luoyue said in a low voice. "You can't move, try to find a place to hide, and take care of yourself. I will find a way to save you." "Okay, you be careful too." Ouyang Jie nodded quickly. He didn't know the situation outside the ward, but he could hear a lot of gunshots and people's frightened screams. The outside of the public ward was probably a mess, even far beyond his imagination. At this time, Zhong Luoyue was afraid that she could not even take care of herself, so no matter whether Zhong Luoyue was sincere or perfunctory, he could only believe it. Ouyang Jie climbed up with the help of the wall, and then quickly jumped to the door of the public ward, closed the door completely, and then took the gun left by his dead bodyguard in his hand. There were originally 2 bodyguards left, and the other seemed to have escaped early when he saw the situation was not good. With his back against the door of the public ward, Ouyang Jie slid to the ground, and then wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and in front of him were the dead bodies of those people. This scene was like déjà vu. 7 years old, or 8 years old, maybe a little older, when he was 9 years old. That was a long time ago, after he ran out of the orphanage. That night, after leaving the oppressive orphanage, Ouyang Jie wandered alone on the street, sleepy and hungry, and even regretted escaping from the orphanage. In fact, the people in the orphanage were very good to him, but he didn't know why. He just wanted to leave the wall. At night, there was a gang fight on the street and many people died. There were corpses everywhere and blood was dripping. He was very scared at that time, so he had to hide. Later, a man came and the man saved him, who almost died in the gang fight. The man didn't say anything and just took him to a huge castle. He told the young Ouyang Jie that his name was Uncle Jean. Uncle Wu. Fortunately, when rushing out of the corridor, Luoqiu and the others met Uncle Wu, who went to find the doctor on duty not long ago. This made Song Ying relieved a lot. Uncle Wu didn't have any wounds on his body, but he looked a little embarrassed, and his neat hair was a little messy. "Miss Ying, don't say anything, we are about to meet up with Uncle and the others." Song Ying made a prompt decision. Uncle Wu nodded, and looked at Luoqiu at the same time. After quickly calling him, he took the initiative to go to the back of the team, and did the work of covering the rear. "It's strange, did you notice that there seems to be no zombies on the road?" Even so, Song Ying didn't relax at all. At this time, Gan Hong said at this time, "Not only that, it seems that even the gunshots have stopped. Look." In the team, Ahu, who was originally an elite guard of the Song family, quickly pointed out the corridor window, with a nervous face. Below, zombies began to come out one by one, like ants returning to their nest, slowly walked out from different places, and after gathering, they moved together in one direction, moving together. What the hell is going to do?" Uncle Wu murmured in confusion. At this time, Luoqiu also looked down with a strange look. He did intend to regulate these zombies, so that they would not bite people, and naturally he didn't need to worry about what would happen next. Human weapons were enough to deal with these zombies that were regulated. But he didn't really make a move, and these zombies seemed to have been regulated by a very obscure power, a power that Luoqiu felt very familiar with. Luoqiu frowned. The rest of the people were alarmed by the gathering of corpses below. Luoqiu quietly took a step back at this time. Like a summer cicada taking off its shell, another Luoqiu took off from his back, and the remaining shell slowly closed its eyes at this time. After taking off the shell, Luoqiu directly let his body sink. all the way down, directly to the first floor of the building. He didn't worry about the safety of Song Ing and the others, because at this moment, all the zombies in the entire hospital had been regulated and gathered under his surveillance. At this time, Gan Hong was the first to react. This is a good opportunity, they seem to be gathering, we should be safe on the way, and can meet up with Master Da Xiao and the others. Song Ing instantly reacted, but when she turned around, she saw that Luoqiu had unknowingly closed his eyes, standing motionlessly. Song Ing was about to pat him, but unexpectedly, Luoqiu's body suddenly softened, directly falling into her arms, burying his face in her chest. Absolutely, yes, on purpose. Song Ing raised her fist, but at this time, Gan Hong was one step ahead. She caringly moved Luoqiu's shell away from Song Ying's body and checked it. Master Qiu seems to have fainted again. Gan Hong frowned at this time. Let's meet up with Master Da Xiao first. She made the quickest judgment, then squatted down, about to carry Luoqiu's shell on her back. Ahu, you carry him. Unexpectedly, Song Ing coldly gave the order. Ahu, one of the elite guards, blinked his eyes, and then saw Song Ying's murderous gaze. He suddenly quivered and quickly said, Miss Hong, let me do this rough work. Gan Hong just silently nodded. At this time, Song Ing. It was Song Haoran's voice. He led Song Air and Song San to find them. Coming out of the inpatient department, Luoqiu followed these moving zombies all the way. He couldn't feel the thoughts of these zombies because they didn't have thoughts. In his black and white vision, there was only a piece of nothingness. Even the gray light didn't exist. This made Luoqiu have a sudden feeling of irritation. He was used to observing a colorful world. The whole world in his vision was like an ocean of souls, floating and sinking with countless lights. Some were as resplendent as pearls, making him fascinated. Some were covered in a layer of dust, but there was also a possibility that they were just pearls temporarily left in the shell. Uncovering them was also a source of great pleasure for him. The vacation time was not long, but it gave Luoqiu a lot of different feelings. His emotions were no longer suppressed. He knew that he was temporarily freed from a kind of cage. Until now, he really understood the real meaning of the former shop owner's so-called loss of freedom. Either he would completely seal off his soul and enter a state of mental death, or he would become completely deified and completely forget about his emotions as he traded more and his abilities increased. Even if he still retained some of his thoughts, he would become an absolute ruler. There would be no distinction between races, no distinction between right and wrong, until he no longer had any attachment to anything. Perhaps, in another sense, he was a living dead. Thinking of this, the irritation in his heart was like a long river bursting its banks. There was also a faint anger. Luoqiu suddenly stopped, silently standing in the same place. The zombies around him walked by one. The world was still without any color. Suddenly, Luoqiu opened his eyes, waved his hand, fast and fierce. A ripple suddenly spread out from his hand. The zombies, touched by this ripple, at this moment, began to collapse around Luoqiu. Their bodies shattered like dust. One by one, they were completely dispelled and annihilated. This was like a kind of catharsis, and the price was that the surrounding zombies completely disappeared. At this moment, Luoqiu slowly turned around. Behind him, Zhong Luoyue and Elizabeth were nervously standing at the entrance of the stairs. They probably followed these moving zombies all the way here. However, they also witnessed the scene of zombies turning into ashes with a wave of his hand. What a terrifying power! If he could annihilate zombies with a wave of his hand, then what in the mortal world could resist him? They saw Luoqiu walking over at this time with no expression. Zhong Luoyue was a little nervous and frightened. This kind of fear was even more than when she met Viscount Fernandez and the monster Uncle Kim turned into. She subconsciously took a small half-step back, but her body suddenly stiffened, her legs suddenly became weak, and she couldn't lift them up no matter what. Luoqiu had already walked in front of Elizabeth. Brother Luaccio. Elisabetha's voice trembled a little. At this time, Luaccio suddenly raised his hand and touched Elisabetha's cheek, only to hear Luaccio whispering at this time, "For me, you're like a treasure, how can I let you disappear in front of my eyes so easily, you should belong to me." At this moment, Elisabetha's brain was blank as if it was struck by lightning. Hearing this, Jean Louis' mind also paused for a few seconds. Is this a confession? Is this a confession? Is this the confession of a domineering president? Jean Louis didn't know how Elisabeth really felt at this time, but she was a person with sharp eyes. Elisabeth's body was almost soft at this time, and her eyes were very soft. Looking at Luaccio's appearance with infatuation, Jean Louis felt that it was over. This man is too frightening. Just as she was thinking, Luaccio suddenly looked at her. At the moment when her eyes met Luaccio's eyes, Jean Louis also had a feeling of suffocation. It was not fear, but she didn't know what was crazily attracting her. A kind of excitement seemed to come from the depths of her body, giving her an impulse to get closer. "You're also very good. I won't let you leave me." Is he saying this to me? Is he looking at me? Is this man making a declaration? Her brain was spinning crazily. First, she measured the difference in strength between them. Jean Louis soon found that her very rich superpower could not resist the other party's real ability at all. At this time, Luaccio was holding Elisabeth's hand. At this moment, Elisabeth's eyes were completely infatuated, as if her mind had been seized, just letting Luaccio hold her hand. He came to the front of Jean Louis, whispering, "The mortal world can't hide your intrinsic brilliance. I can see your inner brilliance and beauty." His palm slowly caressed Jean Louis' face, then lingered on her lips and directly slipped down, making Jean Louis' breathing gradually quicken. Then Luaccio's hand stroked her chest, gently pressing on her heart, as if he was feeling her beating heart. Possession. Luaccio's face suddenly suffused with an evil smile, like a whirlpool, directly sucking Jean Louis' thoughts into it. Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 909. Song Hauran met up with Song Ying's group without any danger, because they also noticed that the zombies seemed to be attracted by something. Luaccio fainted again, but Song Hauran didn't have time to care about him. The most important thing was to let everyone safely leave the hospital, and then completely seal off the hospital. Although the zombies were scary, they weren't impossible to deal with. At least on the way, Song Hauran himself had already killed 4 zombies. After receiving Song Ying and the others, Song Hauran quickly brought everyone to meet up with Master Song's group. The cold bronze sword beside Mr. Blind had already disappeared. He was only silently observing the movements of the zombies after they met up. What the hell is going on? On the 3rd floor of the hospital building, this was the place where all the members of the Song family met up. Right now, Song Tianyu, Song De, and the others were looking down in shock and fear. The parking area at the entrance of the hospital was also the final destination of all the zombies. They didn't know when a tree appeared here, a kind of thing that could barely be described as a tree. It was now 7 or 8 meters tall, its whole body was black, and there were branches growing out from the top, but it was made up of many zombies. At this moment, those slowly moving zombies, one by one, walked to the front of this tree, and then squeezed their bodies into the trunk of this tree. Their flesh, their bones, their faces, at this moment, were all buried in this tree. They intertwined with each other, as if they were nutrients, making this tree bigger and bigger. The tree didn't have leaves, but at this moment, they were slowly growing out from the ends of the branches, one by one, like fruit. The fruits were constantly expanding, like balloons, as if they would burst in the next second. Right now, Mr. Blind's face was incomparably dignified. He suddenly pinched his fingers into a sword shape and waved it forward. A cold light instantly shot out from his body, directly shooting into the trunk of this tree. However, the moment the cold light hit the tree, it was like hitting a solid alloy, and was instantly deflected. That cold light circled around in the air a few times, continuously shooting towards the trunk and branches of this tree, but in the end it couldn't even cut the fruit. Its degree of hardness was shocking. Finally, the cold light slowly returned to Mr. Blind's side, and turned into an ancient bronze sword, which he held in his hand. Mr. Blind frowned and said, "Master Song, my mind is buzzing, I'm afraid a disaster is about to befall us. The fruit's on this tree, I'm afraid it's the source of the disaster." As he spoke, those grayish-black fruits suddenly stopped expanding and gradually changed shape. They became like flower bud. Only then did everyone realize that what was growing out of the ground wasn't a fruit, but a huge flower ball. "They are planning to bloom." Song Howren's heart jumped and he cried out in shock. Mr. Blind opened his eyes in a daze. His eyes were completely turbid, without pupils, as if his pupils had completely scattered in his eyeballs, causing people to feel a sense of fear. He said quickly and anxiously, "This strange tree is formed from the essence of the zombies, and these flowers can only grow after absorbing the essence of the zombies. I have a feeling, when these flowers finally bloom, they perhaps will spread in another way." Everyone's shocked gazes converged on Mr. Blind's body, and subconsciously followed this train of thought. If they could not only bite people, but they could also spread through the air. "This is only my worst prediction." Mr. Blind shook his head, but he didn't seem relaxed at all. "But no matter what, we can't let this strange tree continue to grow." After saying that, Mr. Blind directly jumped out and landed in front of the strange tree, facing the zombies that were constantly moving, wanting to become nutrients for the strange tree. He raised the ancient bronze sword in his hand. Instantly, the sword flashed, and Mr. Blind wandered around the strange tree, killing the zombies that came one by one. San, let's go down and help Mr. Blind." Songda shouted at this moment. The height of the third floor was not difficult for martial artists like them, but in an instant, Songda and his two brothers had already begun to wander around the edge, reducing Mr. Blind's workload. The rest of the people couldn't help much, and could only use their pistols to shoot the zombies that slipped through the net, spreading out a fire net that wasn't too dense. However, they looked at the flower buds on the strange tree, and they were still slowly growing, and the speed didn't seem to have decreased by much. "Old 5, prepare to evacuate, we need to prepare for the worst," Song Tianyu ordered decisively. Uncle 5 nodded and began to pick up the phone, making a series of arrangements. Her body didn't feel the slightest discomfort, and even her instincts didn't produce disgust. Instead, there was a strong urge to move, making Zhong Luoyue feel that it was fine as it was, or take it a step further. She didn't know where this kind of impact came from, but she knew that at this moment, it was as if he had picked up her soul in the vast ocean, and then held it in the palm of his hand, touching the softest part of her heart, and grasping her everything. Without love, there was something that made her more attached than love. Suddenly, Luochio's palm began to merge into Zhong Luoyue's body. At this moment, Zhong Luoyue felt an unprecedented pain. She wanted to cry out, but her voice couldn't be transmitted. The palm didn't just enter her body, but also her thoughts, as if it was plucking the only fruit cultivated in the sea of thoughts. Finally, it grasped the forbidden fruit in the sea of thoughts. Zhong Luoyue only felt that her consciousness instantly became completely blank, and her thoughts completely stopped at this moment. Luochio's palm was still inserted into Zhong Luoyue's body, but she seemed to have become an empty shell. He closed his eyes to feel, but his vision was much clearer than when he opened his eyes. He could see the gentle light in his palm. He only needed to take his hand back, and he would be able to pluck this beautiful light. Strong, confident, and the most beautiful and most moving light belonged to Zhong Luoyue. Finally, Luochio's hand slowly withdrew from Zhong Luoyue's body. Between his fingers, a flickering light was jumping, as if it was afraid, like a cub that had just lost the protection of its parents, and was extremely afraid of the unfamiliar environment. But at this moment, the moment this light was about to leave Zhong Luoyue's body, Luochio's palm suddenly opened, but it was pushed back into Zhong Luoyue's body. Zhong Luoyue's eyes suddenly became lively, and then she fainted on the ground. While Lisabeth was still motionless, Luochio didn't pay attention, and only silently looked at his palm. He was silent for a moment, slowly exhaling and softly said, "I finally know what this familiar power is." At this moment, traces of gray and black smoke overflowed from Luochio's body, moved and gathered behind him, gradually turning into a shadow. The shadow was still forming, and when Luochio turned around, he saw another him. The skin was slightly darker, or it could be said to be gray. Other than that, it was exactly the same as him. Luochio and it looked at each other for a moment, then said, "Should I call you Black?" At this time, it also moved, its expression was more flexible, and a contemptuous smile floated on its face, classifying the bad, the opposite, and even the things you don't like as black. Tut tut, stupid habitual thinking. Luochio indifferently said, "If I call you Black Luochio, I'm a bit unhappy. Black and white, if I'm black, you're white Luochio, I'm quite happy." Its smile was more evil at this moment. Luochio was silent for a moment, and began to look at the other side, through the wall, through all the obstacles. He saw the people who were trying hard to stop the zombies from approaching a strange giant plant, suddenly said, "Air transmission?" Just slightly changed some of their characteristic. Black Luochio chuckled at this time. "Don't you think it's too inefficient to simply transmit by biting? By the way, I'm not the one who's doing this. You're the one who's doing this, using your own power." "What do you mean?" Luochio calmly said. It smiled evilly. "I'm not the product of the club, I'm your product, but I think I should replace you more. To put it simply, I've always been suppressed, a part of all your emotions. I'm afraid I didn't have the chance to appear. You and I both know that as long as we work for a day, it can't let us have more emotions. However, this kind of suppression has always existed in your heart. Your unwillingness, your anger, and even your despair finally gave birth to me. But I still can't come out." "This time's vacation?" Luochio suddenly became silent. "Yes, this time's vacation." Black Luochio sneered. "What a stupid way, but I really like it. Especially Yu Yi, it's really great, she actually made this vacation longer. How should I dote on her? I really want to dig out her soul." Luochio suddenly rubbed between its eyebrows, it seemed to have a headache, sighing. "To be honest, this situation is quite bad. I more or less feel a little ashamed to see such a chunibu." "It's you who are too rigid." Black Luochio opened its hands. "With the club, you have the supreme power. As long as you can sacrifice, you can do almost anything. Why not do as you wish? If you want to get something, you can get it easily. Why do you have to go through so much trouble? This world should be yours. No, it should be mine. I can be the master of the world. My will be the will of all things in the world. This world, if I want it to live, it will live. If I want it to die, it will die. I am supreme." Luochio gently rubbed its forehead. "So you influenced me, secretly controlling these zombies to change? It should be said that your power is too useful." Black Luochio's eyes showed a fanatical look. Just a little bit, even you can't feel it, and I have already changed the life structure of these zombies. See those flowers? The moment they bloom, countless pollen will spread with the wind, the whole world will fall into a panic in a short time, countless people will be willing to sacrifice everything in order to survive. I created a new order. How wonderful it is! The new order has been created. What's next? Luochio suddenly asked. Black Luochio sneered. I will be the master of the world. I can get whatever I want. No one can go against my will. After you become the master of the world, what's next? Luochio continued to ask. Isn't the next more obvious? Everything has me, and everything follows my heart. I can be happy all the time, and I can ask for anything. As long as I am willing, I can play all of life once. Do you think I will be bored and lonely because of this? You are too naive. I can let the people I like accompany me. They will accompany me forever, and they will never go against my will. What's next? Luocio still asked indifferently. You think you can influence me? Naive, naive, naive. Black Luocio suddenly rushed forward, grabbed Luocio's collar and lifted him up. Naive. Stupid. What's next? You still haven't answered me. Luocio said indifferently. Black Luocio grabbed Luocio in front of him, fiercely staring at him. I am the truest reaction in your heart, don't you know? Naive guy, don't make a futile struggle. Luocio shook his head and said, In the end, you still can't convince me. Why do I feel that what you said is so boring in the end? Interesting and boring, you will know when you try. Come on. Let me dominate you. Black Luocio suddenly dispersed, turned into billowing black smoke, and began to flow into Luocio's body. After everything had flowed in, Luocio closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, Luocio had a wicked smile on his face. But his smile suddenly became stiff, his body seemed to be out of control, and his palm slowly raised at this time. He was frightened and tried to use his other hand to press the palm down. However, no matter how he tried to organize, at this moment, a thick black fog began to emerge from the palm. It overflowed from Luocio's body, and then gathered in the palm. He said crazily at this moment, I will not disappear. As long as you still want to keep your humanity, I will not disappear. So much nonsense. Luocio's expression had returned to calmness, only the black light ball was held in the palm of his hand. Luocio's palm began to close, and the black light ball was constantly compressed. But when it was compressed to the limit, only a little bit was left. It jumped crazily, as if it was the last resistance. And Luocio's palm seemed to be unable to close, so it was in a stalemate. But Luocio suddenly said at this time, By the way, if you appear again next time, it's not that I let you in, but that I'm bored, so I let you out. Just like this time. If I don't have this intention, but help you out, do you think you can come out? I'm just on vacation, not. It stopped struggling in an instant, as if it felt some kind of despair. Luocio's palm instantly clenched into a fist at this moment, and the little bit of black matter was completely crushed. He slowly sighed and then looked around. Zhong Luoyue was still unconscious, and Wei Lisabeth was still in a state of absent-mindedness at this time. Dark history. Luocio shook his head, and then muttered, The agitation and uneasiness have been vented, and the mood should be stabilized next. I can still continue my vacation for a while. The effect is not bad. But at this moment, a voice sounded in Luocio's mind. Only he could hear it. He didn't know whether it was his imagination or it really existed. The voice of the mysterious altar in the club. Congratulations, boss, for successfully fooling yourself. Boss's authority has been upgraded, the function of the critical door has been upgraded, and the option of descending to the multi-dimensional world has been added. Luocio was stunned, and then blinked. Chapter 9-10. In fact, it was just a piece of information, self-assembled in a form that Luocio could accept, and finally reflected in his mind. It was about the addition of the multi-dimensional world coordinate. After pondering for a moment, Luocio decided to solve the problem at hand first. He would study the added function later. Because he had discharged the things that had accumulated for a long time, Luocio felt pretty good at the moment. But later he thought about it and wondered if it was actually some kind of physiological behavior. Self-release. Luocio shook his head, and then waved his hand to let Zhong Luoyue, who was unconscious on the ground, stand up slowly. After getting up, Zhong Luoyue was still unconscious, and Wei Lisabeth was still standing there with empty eyes. The appearance of Luocio He made Luocio understand one thing. Luocio He did not have any combat power. He did not know any fighting skills. Although he could buy them from the altar and learn them by himself, it was actually putting the cart before the horse. because he began to figure out the nature of the power that the club gave him. Will. A kind of will that could affect everything. A kind of will that could even affect and change the structure of matter within a certain range. To put it simply, it could be regarded as a weakened version of the ability to make one's wish come true. For example, the strange huge plant outside the hospital was the result of Black Chio's instigation. He accidentally leaked a trace of his idea, which eventually led to the final result. Thinking about it this way, Luochio seemed to understand why the altar opened the new function of the critical door. The only thing that could restrain the owner was the owner himself. Although the owner was only the spokesperson of the club, the power given to him was real. Of course, this power might disappear after he left office. For example, when he took office, he would age and die. But as long as he was in office, this power would not disappear. It felt like he, as the owner, had become the vessel of this power. Every shop owner would become a vessel for this power. The power of the club was so great that even Luochio could not completely imagine its limit at this time. It might even have no limit. Since that was the case, whether or not the person who was the vessel could make good use of this power was probably a very important indicator. The altar would not be a system type, but a fixed program created by a will that was above this power. The program wouldn't hurt the owner. This time, even if Black Luochio succeeded in dominating Luochio, Black Luochio could still exist as the club's boss. Except for the difference in ideology, there was no difference. However, it was possible that Black Luochio would not be able to obtain the coordinates of the multiverse. Different containers, different choices. There is already another path in front of me. Luochio was silent for a moment, and then he muttered to himself, "Black represents." At this time, Luochio heard something and stopped thinking. It turned out that Elizabeth had woken up. Black Luochio had been scattered by Luochio, and the will that affected things leaked out by Black Luochio was also calmed down by Luochio's own subconscious. Elizabeth would naturally wake up. Even Zhong Luoyue showed signs of waking up. Your light should be released by yourself. Luochio smiled slightly. Since the chaos had occurred, the next step was naturally to calm it down. It was too terrifying. He actually annihilated these zombies in an instant with a wave of his hand. Then, could he also annihilate other things? Zhong Luoyue looked at Luochio in front of her, but she felt that the thoughts in her mind were not continuous. It was a very strange feeling, but she just watched Luochio walk over. Elizabeth raised her head and asked curiously, "Brother Luochio, did you gather these zombies? Other than you and I don't feel any other vampires nearby." "In theory, it was me who gathered them." Luochio thought for a while and said, "But there were some mistakes in the middle, but it has been solved." "That's good." Elizabeth nodded, as if because of this sentence, she was completely relieved. Zhong Luoyue felt that Elizabeth relaxed too quickly. She trusted this guy unconditionally like this? Zhong Luoyue frowned and subconsciously looked at Luochio. For some reason, the moment she met Luochio's eyes, she suddenly felt a vague, strange feeling in her heart. But it was just a flash. Before she could think about the source of it, Luochio had already looked at her and asked, "Miss Zhong, is there something wrong, or is there something wrong?" Zhong Luoyue shook her head. "Nothing, just a little absent-minded." "Next, what are you going to do with these zombies?" "Next, they can deal with them by themselves," Luochio said indifferently. Zhong Luoyue asked curiously, "Are you going to wash your hands of it?" Luochio suddenly said, "Every individual, existing in this world, has something that it can contribute to the world, and also has its own opportunity to shine. Since it is within the ability, why should we deprive it? The world is and should also be a changeable combination. It should not be regulated by a will or idea. Everyone should be the unique protagonist in their own life." Then a little suggestion. Zhong Luoyue, who was still thinking about the meaning of Luochio's words, showed a puzzled expression at this time. Luochio looked at Elizabeth and said, "You are now a little sensitive to the identity of ordinary people, and there is a gentleman with good ability outside. Please be careful, it's best not to show up. After all, some deep-rooted ideas are difficult to change. And human nature, most of the time, is built by these ideas. If changed, it will become monotonous. Then goodbye. Wait a minute. Elizabeth stopped Luocchio, who was about to leave at this time, and hurriedly said, Brother Luocchio, I didn't have time to ask you when we were in the castle. If I want to see you, how can I see you? It was probably because foreign girls were more direct. Although they were still shy in character, they were still direct. Zhong Luoyue had a feeling that Elizabeth might have fallen into a trap. But she ignored the fact that she also instinctively pricked up her ears, as if she also wanted to hear the answer at this time. When needed, Luocchio said casually, and then waved his hand. A light began to slowly fall on Elizabeth's snow-white hair, and finally turned into a half-butterfly hair ornament, opening her originally slightly long bangs. Elizabeth subconsciously reached out to touch it, only to hear Luocchio whispering at this time, When needed, it will tell me. I will cherish it. Elizabeth's eyes were shining. Luocchio glanced at Zhong Luoyue again, and suddenly said, Miss Zhong, you already have it, I won't send you any more. Then goodbye. Listening to Luoccio's words, Zhong Luoyue was suddenly stunned. She already had it, won't send me any more? What did you send me? Was it the power bank that was given to him in the maze? But Luocchio turned and left. His figure gradually faded, and finally disappeared at the gate. Zhong Luoyue breathed a sigh of relief at this time, and smiled bitterly. Zhong Luoyue did not know if it was because he had relaxed, but he suddenly felt hungry. Elizabeth suddenly said at this time, You're showing your teeth, control yourself. Sucking blood. It was an established fact that Zhong Luoyue was not willing to face, and was not prepared to face. She touched the sharp little tooth between her lips, and felt a sense of absent-mindedness. Do I really have to suck blood? I don't have pure blood now. Elizabeth said seriously at this time, but I don't recommend you to suck human blood at the beginning. As a newborn, if your first blood is the blood of living people, it will be difficult for you to control your impulse to suck human blood in the future. Only by using pure blood for a long time can vampires survive the hunting day and not be lost. The point is that you really don't have pure blood now, right? Zhong Luoyue smiled bitterly. To be honest, I'm really hungry right now. It's a level of hunger I've never felt before. I have a feeling that I won't be able to control myself after a while. Fortunately, we are in the hospital. Elizabeth suddenly said, The blood bank here should have a lot of healthy blood type. Although the effect is not as good as the pure blood of the 13 families, at least it is better than sucking human blood at the beginning. The blood bank should be over here. This is probably the vampire's ability to sense blood. Zhong Luoyue looked at Elizabeth's appearance when she quickly and decisively pointed in a certain direction. She was calm and even decisive, completely different from her shyness when she met Luocchio. This girl actually has 2 personalities? Elizabeth seems to be dozens of years old. What are you doing? Let's go. Okay. The chaos did not last long, but for the survivors it was probably a long wait. The outbreak of zombies did not harm all the living people in the hospital. People hid in different places in the hospital and did not dare to come out, so there were very few spectators in a battle that exceeded the limits of the human body. In addition, it was now night, and the parking lot outside the hospital building was dark. Even if there were people who could see, they could not see clearly what the people who killed the zombies looked like. But this naturally did not include the people of the Song family. It was not difficult to kill hundreds of zombies one by one, if there were heavy weapons, but not everyone would carry heavy firepower on the streets, even the elites of the Song family. However, Mr. Blind's flying sword was incomparably sharp. The number of zombies that had fallen under his flying sword numbered in the dozens. At this time, Uncle Wu suddenly said, Master, our people have already set off. They will arrive in 15 minutes at the earliest. Let's go to a more empty place and wait for the helicopter to land. It seems that the number has started to decrease. Song Howren was changing the magazine at this time and glanced at the situation below. I just don't know if there are still some hidden ones. Be careful, young master. Uncle Wu hurriedly persuaded him. He knew that Song Howren was the kind of person who was born with an adventurous mind, a guy who liked to seek excitement and was restless. Song Howren did not say anything at this time, but quietly grasped the sun god's badge he was wearing and used his extraordinary perception ability. At this time, the whole hospital began to construct a three-dimensional geometry in his mind. He saw the frightened people hiding everywhere, and also saw two women walking quickly in the corridor, but obviously they were not zombies, although the place where the two women were walking seemed to be the blood bank. Song Howren's consciousness did not stay any longer, but searched the whole hospital. After a while, Song Howren opened his eyes, and then shouted to the people below, "Sir, next is the last batch, there are no more hidden ones." Mr. Blind's bronze sword stopped, and suspended in front of him. He nodded in the direction of Song Howren. He knew that the young master of the Song family had a magical perception ability. Song De, Song Air, Song San. Mr. Blind suddenly said, "You guys work together to help me capture a zombie, maybe it will be useful." "Okay." Song De turned his head to respond, and then stared at the entrance of the inpatient department, only to see a figure slowly walking out. He didn't think too much about it and sprinted away. With his palm strength, it was easy to smash a zombie's head, but it would take a lot of effort to keep it alive. This zombie couldn't be smashed unconscious, but could only be trapped. Therefore, Song De decided to directly kill this zombie. Song Air and Song San would do the work of capturing people. "Ha!" Song De fiercely shouted, but at this moment, Song De saw a pale face with a rotten wound, but Song De recognized this face, because the zombie he wanted to capture alive was unexpectedly Natasha, whom he met in the castle's basement maze. Song De was suddenly startled. Suddenly, the scene of this woman wiping his sweat in that predicament flashed in his mind, a living girl. But at this moment, Natasha suddenly opened her mouth and rushed toward him to bite. Song De quivered, reached out his hand to block in front of Natasha, and then with a palm strength, Natasha was knocked down to the ground. Natasha was knocked down to the ground, unable to stand up for a while, could only open her mouth and roar. "Sorry," Song De said in a deep voice, and was about to slap down, but Song Air shouted from afar, "Ada, what's the situation over there?" The palm suddenly stopped in front of Natasha. Song Da's palm did not hit her in the end. He frowned, gritted his teeth, and shouted at Song Air, "Song Air, I've caught one alive." With that said, Song Tiao looked around, then quickly rushed to the front of a 7-seater car, and directly removed the bumper of the car. With this bumper, Song De once again walked in front of Natasha, and bent the bumper, using it as a rope to tie Natasha. Chapter 9:11. In her memory, blood should be red, but the blood in front of Zhong Luoyue was almost black. Generation after generation of blood bags, generation after generation of red and black blood bags. When she held the blood bag in her hand, surprisingly, she did not feel a sense of resistance. Instead, she felt a certain kind of joy in her body. She knew that the blood in the blood bag was sticky, and the refrigeration system of the blood bank made the platelets even more sticky. It was a bit like a handball used for stress relief. "Great, you are so lucky. This hospital actually has the Bombay blood type." Elizabeth took a blood bag to Zhong Luoyue at this time. "Bombay blood type?" Zhong Luoyue was stunned. Elizabeth smiled and said, "This is one of the rarer blood types in the human race. Its effect is naturally not as good as the pure blood of the 13 clans. However, among the many known blood types, it is one of the rare blood types that can reach a purity of 43% and above." Unfortunately, I only found a 400 cubic centimeters blood bag, but for you, it is enough for a while. Generally, newborns should not eat too much. Generally, about 50 cubic centimeters is enough. In her memory, vampires would die when they drank blood. They were predators of fresh blood, so they should be surrounded by fresh blood. She had never known that vampires could suck blood with such precision as milliliters. Of course, Elizabeth said seriously, blood is our food, but it is easy to have indigestion if we eat too much. A scientific and reasonable amount of food can not only help us resist hunger, but also let us absorb the power of blood better. You, a vampire, are talking to me about a scientific and reasonable amount of food? In fact, it is because the 13 families have always controlled the supply of pure blood, so every time you eat, you have to be precise, right? Even so, Zhong Luoyue was very smart and did not say anything. She had a lot of things to think about now, but the most important thing was how to make herself not feel hungry. She was not mentally prepared to kill for blood. Maybe when she was too hungry, she would not have any psychological burden, but for now, she was still rational. She had seen some of Elizabeth's memories, so she already knew how to obtain the pure blood that vampires love. As a newborn without parents, the possibility of obtaining a pure blood was too small. Inspector Ivan said that he would give Elizabeth 10 years of pure blood, but this property might not be shared with her. After all, Elizabeth was also a hungry refugee for a long time. Although Zhong Luoyue felt that she could open this mouth, and Elizabeth was also very likely to give her a small amount of pure blood, if she opened this mouth, it might destroy the relationship between both parties. Unless Elizabeth took the initiative to give it to her, then the situation would be different. Zhong Luoyue did not believe in selfless friendship, she only believed in strong friendship. But strong friendship need to be established. Bombay blood type could be a temporary substitute of pure blood. If a hospital could find a rare blood type, then a rich person with superpowers should be able to get a lot of them. First of all, she should not be in an environment where she was always being helped. Only then could she have a better space to develop with her friend, and not let her friend feel that she was a burden. Only then could they be in a state of equal conversation on many things. Zhong Luoyue slowly tore open the blood bag, and then poured the Bombay blood type into a test tube from the blood bank. She poured it out strictly according to Elizabeth's request of 50 cubic centimeters. Listening to a friend's advice would make the other party feel happy. She observed Elizabeth's reaction and said calmly, "Is it best for me to drink 50 cubic centimeters every time?" She also asked questions which were like common sense to the other party, questions that could be easily answered, a sense of superiority. Generally speaking, your body is your most intuitive reference. Elizabeth rubbed a strand of hair with her fingers. We are very sensitive to fresh blood. If this amount is not enough to fill you up, your body will react accordingly. You can try increasing it by 10 cubic centimeters each time and try to find a suitable amount yourself. Zhong Luoyue nodded and sighed. Elizabeth, if it weren't for you, I think I would have suffered a lot. Praise was a show of dependence and need, making the other party feel needed. We are friends. Elizabeth smiled slightly. I will try my best to help you, don't worry. That's it, we are friends. Zhong Luoyue took a deep breath. Without frowning, she drank the 50 cubic centimeters of blood in the test tube. Surprisingly, the moment the cold blood slid down her throat, she felt a burning sensation in her body like a fire. That's it, I became a vampire. The last zombie was killed by Mr. Blind. After that, he put away his sword and stood still among the corpses, giving off a sense of desolation. This blind swordsman of this generation may not see the blood around him, but others could see it. Song Hauran could see it more clearly. This was what he yearned for, but Mr. Blind said that he would not accept disciples. At this time, Song Hauran brought the only zombie he caught to Mr. Blind and said in a low voice, Blind, see if you can use this." Mr. Blind nodded and walked to the front of this huge and strange tree. He stretched out his hand to touch its trunk, as if he was feeling something. The battle here was over, and on the other side, Luocio slowly opened his eyes and woke up. The first one to notice was Gan Hong. After the zombies were cleared, she changed from a female soldier to a female bodyguard and paid attention to Luocio's situation. "What happened to me?" Luocio rubbed his forehead and stood up with the help of Gan Hong. "You suddenly fainted again." Gan Hong briefly explained what happened after he fainted. "Fortunately, we have successfully cleared all the zombies." Luocio nodded. His face was a little pale, which made people think that he was frightened. This was the reaction of a normal person. However, Fifth Uncle and Song Howren felt that although he was frightened, it was normal. Overall, he was very calm, as steady as Mount Tai. This was a person who could remain calm in the face of a big event. Fifth Uncle did not know about it, but Song Howren felt very gratified. Although Luocio's talent had not been revealed, Song Tianyu was very satisfied with his temperament. "Ha ha! Luocio, how was the story this time?" Song Howren suddenly put his hand on Luocio's shoulder. "Next time, we can talk about the zombies in the hospital." Luocio knew that a lot of Song Howren's adventure stories were true, because he did have the ability to meet those adventure stories. "Master, although the zombies have been cleared out, we still don't know if there are still people turning into zombies in the hospital," Fifth Uncle said calmly. "Moreover, Mr. Blind has some speculations about this strange tree. The danger is still there. We should leave here as soon as possible." "Fifth Uncle is right." Song Tianyu nodded. However, Song Ying suddenly said, "Grandpa, look, this tree seems to be withering." Song Ying pointed at the place where the sun rose. Under the dawn, this strange tree that grew by absorbing the flesh of zombies began to gradually wither. They had yet to calculate how many people had died in this sudden zombie disaster. But Luocio said softly, "It's dawn." Just like what Luocio and Zhong Luoyue said, there were some things that they had the ability to deal with, and they would deal with it well. They was the Song family and the local government that had a good relationship with the Song family. It was said that this had alarmed the local government officials, and even the director of the military region. As a direct participant of this disaster, Master Song was now leading people to have secret talks with the government and the military. The survivors in the hospital were all under control, but whether the news was completely blocked could only be seen in the next 10 hours, and whether the outside world would discuss about it. The hospital staff who turned into zombies, and the family members of the patients who stayed behind, had a lot of work to deal with. As for the strange mutated huge plant, when the sun rose, it withered little by little and finally turned into dust. But the government and the military still did not care about these remnants, but set up a temporary plastic shed in the hospital parking lot and let people guard it for the time being. However, for the sake of safety, everyone in the hospital was unable to leave. Although Master Song wanted the descendants of the Song family to leave this place as soon as possible, the danger of zombies was too great. No one knew why they suddenly broke out. Therefore, under the tough attitude of the government and the military, the group of people could only accept all kinds of examinations in the hospital. Of course, because a large number of medical staff died, at this time the examination was carried out by the military medical team. Luocio was still in his original luxurious ward. Gan Hong was sitting next to the bed, holding a knife and peeling an apple, but she had already changed into a patient's gown. After carefully peeling the apple, she cut it into small pieces, picked out the core, and let the pulp spread out, like a lotus flower. "I'm so angry." But at this time, Song Ying broke the door and scolded, "Forget about the blood and urine test, they actually said something about feces? Why don't they go and take it themselves?" Miss Song Ying, who looked really angry, sat down and casually grabbed the apple on the plate and stuffed it into her mouth. She only ate 2 mouthfuls, then saw Gan Hong and Luocio looking at her, so she stared back at them. What? Did I eat yours? I'll give it back to you. The half-eaten piece was suddenly put in front of Luocio. You eat more, I'm not hungry, Luocio said suddenly, and eating apples should have some effect. Song Ying was stunned, her mouth smacked a few times, and suddenly reached out to cover her mouth and spit out the food. Is there anyone who is so disgusting like you? Is it not good to eat apples? Luocio suddenly looked at Gan Hong and said indifferently, I think it's quite healthy. Gan Hong could only nod. She found that this young Master Luocio was like the natural nemesis of Miss Song Ying. However, she felt that young Master Luocio seemed to have made a harmless joke this time. It seemed to be a little different, and she felt that his mood was very good. But Song Ying was not satisfied. At this time, she pointed her finger and stared. Luocio, let me tell you, don't think that because Grandpa loves you, you can take a mile after taking an inch. No matter what, I'm older than you. So beautiful. Luocio suddenly smiled at this time. Song Ying was stunned and frowned. What did you say? Luocio said softly, Do you still remember the last time when I followed you to Song Dynasty Hotel? At that time, you were busy all night, and there was no expression on your face at all. You were as cold as a machine. But now you look much better, really beautiful. Don't think that by praising me, you can forget about it. Luocio held up the fruit plate and put it in front of Song Ying. You've been busy all night, eat something, it's good for your body. So angry. But she just couldn't find a reason to give birth to it. But she was really angry. Song Ying fiercely stared at him again, and then grabbed the fruit plate. She ate it without saying a word, but she was thinking about something that happened before she came back. Because of this chaos, many places in the hospital were damaged. Song Ying remembered that she secretly bribed a nurse to steal a blood sample last night. Who knew when she would have the chance to draw blood again? It would be best if the sample could be found back. Now that the hospital was full of good and bad people, who knew if this matter would be leaked? If Song Tianyu knew, Song Ying would definitely be in trouble. Grandpa Song hated this kind of distrust between family members the most. But what Song Ying didn't expect was that when she found the doctor, she was told that the test report was already out. She was dumbfounded on the spot. She only heard the doctor in charge of the test, with a smile on his face that made people want to beat him up, said, Oh, I'm so lucky. Last night I was hiding in the laboratory all the time. Miss Song, you also know that the work of testing is very boring. I like to listen to music and then close the door. I didn't expect to avoid a disaster like this. By the way, Miss Song, the test results you asked for, I also finished it overnight. Song Ying unhappily took the report and read it carefully. At this time, the laboratory doctor said, Miss Song, according to the 2 blood samples you sent, my comparison result is that the owners of these 2 blood samples should be relatives, but they should not be direct descendants. The other one was her own. Holding this report, Song Ying, who was a little dazed, didn't know how she walked out, and unknowingly ran to Luocio's ward. It's not good to eat too much. After all, it's raw and cold food on an empty stomach, easy to have diarrhea. Luocio's voice suddenly came, and Song Ying was startled, subconsciously looking at the fruit plate in her hand. She had unknowingly finished the apple peeled by Gan Hong. Chapter 9:12. Opening the curtains slightly, Zhong Luoyue placed her finger on a ray of sunlight. Immediately, she felt as though she was being burned by flames. She immediately withdrew her hand. Daytime should be the time when one's energy was at its peak. However, there was no doubt that she was extremely sleepy right now. Zhong Luoyue yawned. Her head felt heavy. Then, she glanced at the wardrobe. Elizabeth was inside the wardrobe. She had fallen asleep early. They had secretly left the hospital before daybreak. They had avoided the lockdown of the government and military personnel. Then, they had casually found a decent hotel to stay in. Luoyue? Luoyue? At this moment, Zhong Luoyue was making an international call. The other end of the call was the capital of China. Due to the time difference, her grandfather, Grandfather Zhong, had fallen asleep early. The one who answered the call was Grandfather Luo. He was a comrade who had followed Grandfather Zhong for half a century and had gone through life and death with him. "I am listening, Grandfather Luo." Zhong Luoyue rubbed her eyebrows. Then, she replied, "However, I am still somewhat absent-minded. My mind is not clear." There were many reasons for her to call home. In fact, before she had arrived in this city to attend the banquet at Tushini Winery, her bodyguards had been attacked by the Song family. When the bodyguards were sent to the hospital, her family, who was far away in Beijing, had already received the news. Then, the manor had collapsed and the zombie crisis had occurred in the hospital. These were all things that could not be concealed. It is normal for your mind to not be clear. Grandfather Luo's voice was kind. No matter who it is, they would not feel good about it. "Luoyue, don't worry. I will immediately arrange for someone to bring you back. This time, the Song family has gone too far. It is time to knock some sense into them." "Grandfather Luo, this matter does not have much to do with the Song family." Zhong Luoyue forced herself to stay alert. "Song Ying was only joking with me. Right now, the Song family is already in a terrible fix. We can just sit back and watch." "However," Grandfather Luo said in a deep voice, "regardless of whether it's a conspiracy or an overt scheme, there are some publicly recognized rules in the business wars and struggles between aristocratic families. Directly attacking a descendant of an aristocratic family is a violation of the rules. The Zhong family and the Song family don't have any business conflict. At most, they only met in the gambling industry. Originally, they didn't interfere with each other's business. Don't worry, the Zhong family isn't without anything. Since you've already experienced it, there are some things that the old master will tell you when you come back." Sure enough, the Zhong family was hiding something that no one knew about. Perhaps it is some kind of powerful force, but Zhong Luoyue is not optimistic about it, because there is still that mysterious person in the Song family. Zhong Luoyue was too sleepy, so she couldn't really hear what Grandpa Luo was saying over the phone. She could only reply a few words, and when the call ended, Zhong Luoyue fell asleep on the table. She dreamt of the time when she was training in the army, when she was young and lost in the forest. He hid in a tree hole and curled up in fear. From time to time, the cries of wild beasts could be heard from the forest. Zhong Luoyue always felt that this memory was somewhat vague. Perhaps it was because she really wanted to forget this terrible experience. "Are you also lost?" She suddenly heard a young and tender voice. A small head suddenly popped out from the tree hole, and there was also light, fire. "I am also lost. The leaves are blocking the sky and I can't find the North Star. So, can you let me hide here for a while? My father said that it would be safer to hide at night." It was a little boy, not very old, perhaps a few years younger than her. He was holding a torch in his hand. She couldn't remember clearly. 48 hours had passed since the incident, which was also 2 days. According to crisis management, the best time to deal with an incident was the 48 hours after it happened. It was also the most important time to deal with it. Recently, a patient who had taken a dangerous drug called zombie bath salts suddenly went crazy in the hospital. This type of bath salts might be different from the ones that were commonly circulated. It was terrifyingly contagious and could make people go crazy, lose their rationality, and become bloodthirsty. It could also produce serious violent tendencies towards people. It was very dangerous. Ouyang Jie was lying on the hospital bed and watching the local news report. He felt that this explanation was somewhat unreasonable. Vaguely, Ouyang Jie felt that things were not that simple. However, the government had already controlled the public opinion, and the opinions of the people were not uniform. Everyone in the hospital had signed a confidentiality agreement. Of course, they had also received some material compensation, but even so, there were still so-called rumors that were spread. This was also a headache for crisis management, but the responsibility had already been pushed to the so-called zombie bath salt. The government's drug handling department had already called on the community to consciously resist the spread of this illegal drug. They did not want to cause loss of life and property just to get a temporary high. There have been many cases of people going crazy after consuming zombie bath salts and then attacking people. The pictures of the people who consumed the poison that were circulating online were somewhat similar to the zombies that appeared in this incident. People were more willing to believe that this was a drug rather than some kind of panic that would only appear in a movie, right? Ouyang Jie turned off the TV. After that night, he was assigned to a separate ward and underwent various tests. Now, he was waiting for the results of the various tests. Otherwise, he would not be allowed to leave the hospital. As for the so-called human rights, he was not a citizen of this country in the first place. At that time, when he finished his apprenticeship with Tushini, Uncle Kim gave him an identity as a citizen of the United States. The issue of his detention was now being negotiated with the local government by the United States Embassy. Zhong Luoyue later got in touch with him, saying that it was not convenient for her to intervene in this matter for the time being. Ouyang Jie expressed that he could understand. However, he was somewhat dissatisfied that Zhong Luoyue had already left the hospital early. It was just that considering the degree of chaos and danger in the hospital at that time, it was understandable that she would choose to evacuate first. After all, the children of aristocratic families were still the children of aristocratic families. Prioritizing their own safety was the philosophy instilled in them since childhood. It was just that he was not in the mood to think more about Zhong Luoyue's approach at this time, because for him, what was more urgent was the matter of the castle. As time went by, those buried underground would become more and more dangerous. But the difficulty of digging was so great that many people had already lost hope, and he himself had already prepared for the worst. This trip home, he originally had a lot of ideas in his heart, but now Ouyang Jie felt like he had nothing. If life was a gamble, then he was the loser at this time. He had not taken care of himself for a few days, and his mind was full of doubts and uneasiness. His facial hair had already grown out, and he looked dispirited. But at this time, he received a call from an insurance company. "Excuse me, is this Mr. Ouyang Jie? A man named Mr. Jin Wuching bought an insurance with our company, and the designated beneficiary is you. We already know about Mr. Jin Wuching's accident. Although we can't determine whether he is still alive, we still intend to contact you as soon as possible. It's best if you are prepared. Of course, if Mr. Jin is still alive, it's naturally the best." Insurance? What insurance? Ouyang Jie was stunned. Mr. Jin Wuching left a safety deposit box in the bank. According to the agreement, if he unfortunately dies, only you can open it. Uncle Jin left it for me? Ouyang Jie subconsciously looked out of the window, and suddenly felt that the sun was a little dazzling. Being trapped in the hospital was a depressing thing. Moreover, there were many things that did not change. It was not something that made people happy, probably. Why doesn't this guy look unhappy at all? Regarding Miss Song Ying's question, Su Mei found that she did not know how to answer. Speaking of which, Su Mei felt that she was also a lucky person. She survived the collapse of the ancient castle, and there were no zombies on her body. She escaped the disaster in the hospital, but the bodyguard assigned to take care of her at that time was not so lucky. In short, people often say that one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune after. A chance to stay by Song Ying's side was something that many people would fight for. Because she was asked to stay in the hospital, Song Ying was so bored that she almost exploded, and could only find Su Mei as a companion. She glanced at Mr. Luochio in the pavilion downstairs of the inpatient department. They all called him Master Chiu, and it seemed that he was a young master in the Song family who had the same status as Miss Song Ying. Maybe Master Chiu is a relatively cheerful person? Su Mei said cautiously. Even you call this guy young master? Song Ying looked at Su Mei with some dissatisfaction, which suddenly made Su Mei's face a little ugly. Forget it, I don't blame you. Song Ying shook her head, and continued to look at the tablet in her hand. On it were documents sent by the group. Song Ying, who couldn't go to work, could only deal with some things here. Then, because she was too idle, she began to check the accounts of the Song dynasty last year. Even the small electricity bills were not left out. Why do I have to go to work here, and that guy is happily telling stories to the children in the pavilion? Yes, in the pavilion, there was not only Luoqiu and Gan Hong who accompanied him, but also several children in the inpatient department. Quite good at coaxing children, Song Ying casually muttered, and then suddenly frowned. Su Mei, last June, what's the matter with the expenses of Zhonghua Street? Secretary Su Mei was stunned, and then quickly looked at the tablet. But after looking for a while, she didn't find anything strange. This seems to be no problem, missing. The number is wrong, it's missing 700,000. Song Ying frowned, the total number is correct, but all the expenses on the bill are missing 700,000. Such a huge bill was calculated in his mind? Su Mei looked at Song Ying with surprise. Song Ying frowned, took the tablet, her fingers quickly swiped, and then marked 6 places on the document. This financial handling is a bit sloppy. Su Mei shook her head. Song Ying suddenly said, "It's not that they're sloppy, someone is falsifying the accounts." Falsifying the accounts? Su Mei was surprised. Song Ying suddenly stood up. Let's go back to the room, tell the group to send me the accounts of the last 3 years, especially the ones related to Zhonghua Street. Got it. The two hurriedly left. In the pavilion, Luoqiu raised his head and glanced at the back of Song Ying and Su Mei. He stopped in his tracks. Young master, what's the matter? Gan Hong quickly asked. Nothing. Luoqiu smiled. Where was I? One of the children in the pavilion quickly asked. Big brother, you said that Ikaros didn't listen to his father's advice, and was about to fly into the sun when you stopped. What happened after that? Luoqiu whispered. Ikaros was too arrogant. He thought he could fly higher, but the wax on his wings melted due to the heat of the sun, and the feathers fell from his body one by one. When all the feathers on his body disappeared, Ikaros could no longer fly in the sky, and finally fell into the sea. The waves submerged him, leaving only the feathers floating on the sea surface. Then what happened to Ikaros? Did he die? The children asked in horror. Luoqiu slowly said, Do you want him to die? The children shook their heads. Luoqiu said, Then you can continue this story. What do you think happened after that? His father Daedalus saved him. If I was in danger, my father would definitely save me. A little girl said. Well, he could swim, so he could swim to the shore, and then he found his father Daedalus, and then they lived a happy life. A little boy raised his hand and said. The whale in the sea saved him and sent him to the shore. The little boy said. He met the mermaid princess, and they became good friends. The little girl said. Luoqiu quietly listened. The story was already a bit strange, but it was getting more and more interesting. Later, the nurse came and took the children away, and when it was time to take medicine and injections, only Luoqiu and Gan Hong were left in the pavilion. Gan Hong suddenly asked, Young master, Ikaros actually died in the end, right? Luoqiu nodded. The sea buried him, and then washed his body to the shore. His father Daedalus found Ikaros' body. Later, Daedalus took his people and flew to a new place, where they lived a good life. But Daedalus was never happy in his life. But, why didn't you tell the children? Gan Hong didn't understand. Isn't this a myth that arrogance leads to death? Actually, there's another meaning, which is fatalism. Luoqiu suddenly said. Daedalus framed Talos, and was convicted of treason, but he escaped punishment, but Ikaros died. Don't you think that's too heavy a burden for the children? They'll realize this one day when they grow up, right? Chapter 9:13. In fact, Ivan Hizenba, the supervisor of the 13 clans, took longer to recover than he had imagined. Although his spirit had already recovered, his body was still weak for 2 to 3 days, and that was under the effect of consuming a large amount of pure blood. Of course, for Ivan Hessenbach, the inspector of the 13 clans and a direct descendant of a certain prince in the clan, the supply of pure blood was never lacking. The living room was very simple, without any superfluous things. Although it was unusually spacious, there was only one sofa, because Ivan was a minimalist. Simplicity was beauty. Vampires pursued all kinds of strange aesthetics, so it was not strange. At this time, Ivan was facing the fireplace. Although it was still summer in the southern hemisphere, a flame had risen in the fireplace. The flames changed and turned into a human face. This was Ivan's boss, one of the 3 executives with the most power in the entire supervision organization of the 13 clans. Erex. Yes, Your Excellency. Ivan half knelt on the ground, lowering his head with a respectful attitude. He called himself so, and he was very powerful. If he didn't show mercy, I'm afraid I would have. Chaotic nightmare taper. The executive's face in the fireplace flickered, as if he was thinking. After a long time, he said, Ivan, about this matter, just report it to me, and I'll deal with the rest. Ivan Hizenba suddenly said, Your Excellency, the mixed-blood Elizabeth seems to know Erex. Have I started to get more information from her? The executive suddenly said, Ivan, there are many mixed bloods among us. The whole clan's attitude towards mixed bloods is very subtle. At this stage, it's still in a balance. So, don't arouse the conflict between pure and mixed blood. The rebellious heart is not only exclusive to humans. Ivan was startled. As a member of the supervision organization, he naturally got more information. Over the years, from various clues, it seemed that a black hand had been hiding in the whole clan, quietly organizing a group of mixed bloods and plotting something. Of course, this was only his speculation. But from the CEO's words, Ivan had a vague idea in his mind. Had the mastermind really taken action? The executive suddenly said, But the things in the castle need to be thoroughly investigated. You can start from Hydasil. Him? Sir, I didn't notice him at that time. Ivan frowned. The CEO said, Our people have discovered Hydasil's whereabouts in Mexico. The time was just before dawn after the castle incident. The list of names that Tushini submitted for the hunting day banquet had Hydasil's name on it, so he should know about it. Understood. I'll head to Mexico right away. Ivan nodded. I'll let my officer take over here. At present, there seems to be an aristocratic family among the humans who are investigating the castle. When necessary, my affairs officer will know what to do. Some of the big aristocratic families among the humans have a lot of power. Unless it's absolutely necessary, try not to cause conflict between the two sides. We still have weaknesses. The executive sounded a little impatient. Ivan hurriedly asked, Your Excellency, is there any other trouble? Speaking of which, what a coincidence. The executive said in a deep voice, I remember that there is a descendant of the Takizawa family in the name list of the hunting party in the castle, right? Yes, Takizawa Akiyoshi. Ivan nodded. His nickname is the Deceiver. The executive said, A few days ago, I received a report from the Japanese censor. It's also about the Takizawa family. It's very mysterious. The Takizawa family's main branch in East Asia was completely wiped out overnight. What? Ivan raised his head in shock. The Takizawa family in Japan has a 4th generation, and the Takizawa family is transformed from the taboo mixed blood. How could it be so easily? The Japanese censor is relatively weak. Our hands can't reach so far. The executive shook his head. I've already sent more people to investigate. Don't worry about the Takizawa family. Do your own thing first. In addition, a 10-year-old pureblood is a little stingy. This. Ivan was startled. The executive said, Since this mixed blood is related to the chaotic nightmare eating taper, and he's willing to protect it, It proves that the relationship is not simple. The prince's attitude toward Erex is to avoid him as much as possible. We can't give him an excuse to come to us. Later, I'll ask you to send 5 portions of golden pureblood and a 30-year-old pureblood to Elizabeth's home personally. He is really so terrifying? Ivan Hiesenbach's expression changed slightly. The executive said lightly, "You haven't experienced it. In one night, thousands of pure-blood vampires, including the princes, fell into a nightmare. The fear of not being able to save themselves. If he wants to, I'm afraid we'll welcome eternal silence in our dreams. Every time we think of that, it's so despairing. It's not his power that's terrifying, but his ability. Legend has it that he has the ultimate dream ability. He can switch between dream and reality at will, turning dreams into reality." The flames in the fireplace gradually disappeared. In the minimalistic living room, Ivan stood up slowly. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand. The door behind him opened, and a woman walked in slowly with a cold expression. "Gloria, I'm going to Mexico. I'll leave the rest to you." The executive said to try not to have a big conflict with humans. "But there's one thing you have to remember, and that is, everything has to be based on our interests." "Got it, brother." Ivan turned around at this time, looking at the woman named Gloria, but his heart didn't waver. "Lowly mixed blood, don't give me trouble. If you don't want your mother to suffer more punishment for you, then redeem yourself." "Yes, brother." She was still cold and expressionless. The camp had been set up early, and the vicinity of the manor had been designated as a forbidden area. There were soldiers patrolling. In 2 days, the wreckage on the ground of the ancient castle had been cleaned up, but there was no deep excavation underground. This was the government's idea. No one would care why a large number of people from the Song family appeared in such a place, because this place indeed belonged to the Song family. The Song family's secret village had always been cultivating talents in various fields. Those who were suitable for combat were incorporated into the irises flower. As for those with specialties, they were sent to some important departments for support, even the military. However, the camp outside the ancient castle was just a smokescreen created on the surface. The ones who were actually excavating and researching the maze in the ancient castle's basement were another small team. Led by Mr. Blind and Song Howren, the team included the 3 Song brothers and 20 elites from the irises flower. The place they entered was the secret passageway that the 3 Song brothers had escaped from back then. This treasure vault was not affected by the collapse of the underground maze. When Song Howren's team made their way in, it was still intact. Gold, silver, jewels and antiques were all shining due to the lighting tools they brought. Song Howren casually whistled and smiled. "I should have brought a girlfriend." For Song Howren, exploration, beauties and treasures were a very romantic thing. Oni rolled his eyes and casually picked up a string of jewels and hung it around his neck. It looked as vulgar as it could get. Then, Luvia gave him a fierce kick. Mr. Blind said indifferently, "Be careful. There is a large amount of death energy here. According to Song Da's description, there are still a lot of zombies hidden here." Oni and Luvia restrained themselves. There were many instructors in the village, who were said to have all kinds of skills. Mr. Blind would not participate in any of the classes. However, everyone in the village actually hoped to be able to stay by Mr. Blind's side for a while, because Mr. Blind's occasional 1 or 2 words of advice could benefit them immensely. Master Song was someone they had to be loyal to. Thus, Mr. Blind was someone they had to respect. "Let's split up and explore." Song Howren began to give out orders. "Mr. Songda, Mr. Song Air, you 2 lead 15 people. Mr. Song San will follow me. I will lead the rest and follow Mr. Blind. How about it?" Mr. Blind nodded. "Okay." Song Da's 3 brothers also nodded. They had no objection to Song Howren's arrangement. In this way, both teams would have people who were familiar with the underground maze. Songda and Song Air quickly led their own people, and opened the door of the treasure house. They went up the spiral staircase. As for Mr. Blind, he did not move. Instead, he sat on the ground and meditated. According to him, he was sensing the source of the death energy. Mr. Blind said that this place was a place with good feng shui. It was suitable for raising zombies. However, a place with good feng shui was not unchanging. It could gather and naturally could be scattered. For a place with good feng shui to raise zombies, it was naturally better to destroy it than to keep it. Suddenly, Mr. Blind shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" His voice was loud and clear, causing pain in people's ears. Mr. Blind quickly stood up and snorted. He waved his hand and a cold light shot out. The cold light seemed to have pierced something in the air. In the end, it hit the wall. It was a shadow. The shadow was being held up by the ancient bronze sword. In an instant, the shadow slithered away from the wall and escaped through the door of the treasure house. "Song-san, you stay here." Mr. Blind gave the order and chased after the shadow. Seeing Mr. Blind's agile movements, Song-san could not help but sigh. "This guy is really blind. Everyone be careful. There might be other enemies. Be on your guard." Song Howren shouted in a deep voice. He activated his magical perception with all his might. Everyone held the modern weapons in their hands tightly and spread out to observe their surroundings. All of a sudden, Song Howren opened his eyes and swung his arm. A gunshot rang out and everyone was so shocked that they quickly turned their guns around. However, Song Howren suddenly fired at a wooden box filled with gold, silver and jewels. At this time, Song Howren gave Oni a look. Oni understood and carefully crept over. "It's nothing. It's just a spider." Oni quickly turned around and used the gun barrel in his hand to pick out the spider's corpse. The spider was a little bigger than a tarantula. However, its body had been torn apart by the bullet. Oni took a look and admired Song Howren's marksmanship. If the military advisor participated in the ranking, he would be the #1 gunman in the South America region, no, perhaps the world. Seeing that it was only a spider, Song Howren seemed to relax and slowly lowered his arm. However, at this moment, his heart throbbed and he raised his head to look. It was also a spider. An incomparably huge spider. "Spider!" Someone screamed. Song Howren subconsciously looked down and saw that a large number of spiders had emerged from the treasure house. And the source of that scream was one of the village's warriors. His body was completely covered by a large number of spiders. He fell to the ground and kept struggling as the spiders swarmed over his body like a small mound of dirt. However, they slowly shrunk. The warrior's screams had already stopped. When the spider left his body, all that was left behind was some clothes and the equipment he was wearing. In the blink of an eye, the soldier was completely eaten up. "There are spiders here too. Here too." The terrifying spiders rushed over from all directions and quickly forced everyone to gather together. Song Howren was sweating profusely. When facing zombies, he could fight against dozens of them. However, when facing these spiders, he did not have a good way to deal with them. At this moment, his martial arts were not as useful as his firearms. The machine gun began to madly shoot around in an attempt to stop the spiders. However, there were too many of them. The weak net of fire was simply unable to stop the spiders from advancing. Moreover, above their heads, there was an even more terrifying giant spider. Its 8 glowing eyes were constantly staring at Song Howren and the others below. "How many monsters are raised in this damn place?" Song Howren cursed. He reached out and took out a grenade. Using his mouth to bite open the safety pin, he threw it out with all his might. Rumble, rumble! There was an explosion in front of them. A large number of spiders were blown to pieces. However, it also opened up a path to the treasure house. "Go! Close the door of the treasure house!" Song Howren shouted. Everyone ran with all their might. However, at this moment, the giant spider above them had already made its move. It quickly spat out a bunch of spider silk. In an instant, it shot towards the back of one of the soldiers and directly wrapped around his entire body. As a result, the warrior fell to the ground, and his body, which was wrapped in the spider silk, was being pulled away. Damn it! At this moment, the giant spider shot out spider silk again. This time, not only did it wrap around the Song family's soldiers, but it also wrapped around Song Howren's body. Song Howren frantically tried to tear off the spider's silk on his body. However, the spider silk was as tough as steel cable. Even a warrior like him could not tear it off. His body was suddenly pulled up. Ah! Ah! Like a fish that had been caught, the giant spider above them was like an angler. It easily fished them away one by one. Less than 5 meters away from the door, only Song Howren and Luvia were left. Song Howren held Luvia's hand. The door was right in front of them. Perhaps it would only take a second. However, at this moment, a huge pulling force came from behind. Luvia's hand was forcefully pulled away from his hand. Luvia was also taken away by the giant spider, from his hand. Song Howren gritted his teeth. Glancing at the door in front of him, he suddenly turned around and reached out to hold the sun god badge on his body. Once again, he fully activated his perception. In the darkness, in the three-dimensional world constructed, he saw the figures that were hung up one by one. They were not dead and still had heartbeats. However, what about the giant spider? Suddenly, Song Howren felt a heart-wrenching pain that almost caused his brain to lack oxygen. Chapter 9:14. Summer 2013, Amazon Jungle, Golden City Archaeological Team. The legend of Golden City and Golden Lake had been circulating in the American continent for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, explorers from all over the world had come in an endless stream, but from beginning to end, no one had ever seen the true appearance of Golden City, which had sunk into Golden Lake. Perhaps only the emperor of the Incan Empire, who had built Golden City in the legends, had seen the true appearance of Golden City. A small temporary camp had been set up in the jungle. This archaeological team of Golden City had a total of 23 people, and the leader was a professor of archaeology named Dorowan. At this time, Professor Dorowan was in a tent discussing with his assistant, a native who was responsible for leading the way and was familiar with the local jungle environment, and a retired soldier in the team who was responsible for the military force. They had been in the jungle for 20 days. They had arrived at Golden Lake long ago, but they had no clue about Golden City. Many years ago, the local government had sent the army to protect Golden Lake and put an end to illegal exploration. But even the army was not strong enough, and there were still many people who sneaked into the forbidden area. As time passed, the local government's supervision of this place was not as good as before. Professor Dorowan, our supplies are running out, the retired soldier said. The one who spoke was the veteran, Sang Ta. The remaining food can only support us for another 4 days at most. Otherwise, we will starve on the way back. Santa, my old friend, please give me some more time, Professor Dorowan pleaded. I have been studying the Incan civilization all my life. I believe that Golden City definitely exists, and the entrance is nearby. 1 week, at most 1 week. Santa frowned. Professor, you should understand that you and I are hired to come here, and I am the leader of this team, but I also have the responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone. This was not an archaeological expedition initiated by Professor Dorowan, but one with a sponsor. The sponsor provided Professor Dorowan with a lot of information, and with Professor Dorowan's recommendation, Santa was appointed as the leader. But this time, the sponsor did not come with the team. It was even possible that the sponsor was commissioned by someone else. He was just a middleman. No one knew who the real boss of this expedition was. But even if Sanada promised to spare some time, Professor Dorowan still frowned as he looked at the maps spread out on the ground. At this moment, there was a sudden cheer outside the tent. The few of them walked out in confusion and found that the members of the archaeological team were gathered together and shouting. Professor Dorowin called over a member and asked about the matter. "Professor, one of the team members hunted a wild boar in the forest. Everyone is happy and discussing how to eat it." Professor Dorowin was taken aback and nodded. "Hunting? Who hunted it?" Sunta couldn't help but become curious. Cultured people thought that hunting a wild boar might be a simple task for a hunter. However, this was not the case. An adult wild boar was very aggressive. If one was not careful, it could even bring about life-threatening danger. The team member pointed forward and saw a man sitting under a tree with a hat covering his face, half lying down. Professor Dorowin curiously led his men over. "You hunted the wild boar? How did you do it?" The young man took off his hat. Under his messy hair was a slightly tanned face. It should have been tanned by the sun during this period. It was a rare Oriental face. Professor Dorowin was a little puzzled. He remembered that this person was indeed in his archaeological team, but he was not his student. Sunta brought him in when he was recruiting people. Looking at the situation, Sunta did not seem to be very familiar with this young man. However, Professor Dorowin and Sunta had known each other for many years. He knew that Sunta was not an irresponsible person. This young man should have something extraordinary. "Song, did you really hunt this wild boar by yourself?" Sunta was surprised at this time. He found this young man in the tavern. At that time, he saw him fighting with the drunkards in the bar. He was quite good at fighting, so he chatted with him. After that, they hit it off, and then he joined the archaeological team. Sunta did not know his full name. He only knew that he asked others to call him Song. "Is there a problem?" Song yawned at this time. He was about 23 or 24 years old, and there was always a faint smile on his face. In these 20 days, Song basically did not communicate with the people in the team. He appeared to be a man of few words. He just silently followed the team and did his own things. "Amazing!" Sunta laughed at this time. Song shrugged and said indifferently, "I've been a little tired of eating dry food recently. I want to eat some fresh meat. Maybe I'm lucky. I planned to just catch 2 fish and roast it myself, but then this big guy came to me. This big wild boar was enough for the whole team to eat for a day and a half. It was undoubtedly good news for the archaeological team that was short of supplies. But Professor Dorowin suddenly said, "Song, what are you holding in your hand?" Song was stunned, then he raised his hand. On his wrist was a small ornament carved out of bone. "This. I picked it up from the ground. It looked quite special, so I wore it. Is there a problem?" Professor Dorowin grabbed Song's wrist and carefully examined the small ornament. This is a kind of ornament worn by soldiers during the Inca dynasty. Its function is similar to the military badges worn by some soldiers in the army today. It is used to identify one's identity. Where did he find this thing? Song, you must tell me. This may be a major breakthrough. I see. Song thought for a while and said, "I can't tell you the exact place, but I can bring you there. Right away. We'll go there right away." Professor Dorowin was so excited that even his neck was red. He then asked Sunta to leave a few people behind to guard the camp and set off with the team. Song brought the archaeological team to the bottom of a small waterfall, but it was not an easy journey. Even Sunta, a veteran with field experience, was sweating profusely by the time he arrived, not to mention a scholar like Professor Dorowin. At this time, Song stood on a big rock in the pool under the waterfall and pointed at the bottom of the waterfall. "There seems to be a small cave there, but it's too dark. I was worried that there might be poisonous snakes hiding inside, so I didn't go in. This thing was found in there." Professor Dorowin was resting on the ground. When he heard that, he quickly got up and shouted, "Quick, quick! Sunta, find some ropes. I want to go in and take a look myself." Song raised his head and looked at the top of the waterfall. which branch of the Amazon River had diverged a few times before reaching this place. Looking at the members of the archaeological team who were busy exploring the cave under the waterfall, a smile appeared on Song's face. He muttered softly, "It's true. If they don't give us any clues, it's useless. I almost wasted my pocket money for nothing." Sigh. After stretching his muscles, Song jumped into the pool and swam toward the bottom of the waterfall. This was not the first time he explored this place. The last time was a few months ago, and the team last time was wiped out. The impact of the water suddenly soared. Every inch forward took a lot of effort. However, at this time, Song seemed to hear some kind of sound. It was a whisper that had been occasionally ringing in his mind since he survived a few months ago. He tried countless times to remember these strange sounds and its syllables, but every time he tried, he was so confused. He seemed to understand the meaning of these whispers, but he could not organize them in his mind. They were always so specious. What kind of secret is hidden in here? I'm really looking forward to it. Someone from the archaeological team had already arrived and tied a rope. Everyone pulled on the rope and slowly made their way past the waterfall. They arrived at the back of the waterfall. Just as Song had said, there was a cave that was neither too big nor too small. Professor Dorowan looked around while Sanada observed the edge of the cave. There are traces of excavation here. Although it has been severely eroded by the flowing water, it can still be seen that someone has been here before. I'm afraid it's the ancient people of the Inca dynasty. Professor Dorowan took a deep breath, took a strong light from the team member, and shone it into the cave. This section of the road was not easy to walk. It was downwards, and most of the road was filled with gravel. Because of the water vapor, it was very easy to slip and fall. However, after going downwards for a while, the interior had become dry. After about 50 meters, Professor Dorowan found some ancient murals on the wall, which made Professor Dorowan very excited. "This is a painting of a sacrifice," Professor Dorowan said loudly. "Sure enough, the information given to me by the mysterious investor is not wrong. This is the recording method used by the ancient people of the Inca dynasty." Is it the City of Gold?" a student of Professor Dorowan asked nervously. This doesn't seem to record the City of Gold." Professor Dorowan touched these murals step by step as he walked over. When he arrived before the last mural, he suddenly stopped. His expression was somewhat surprised as he muttered to himself, "A black sun swallowing the sky. What does that mean?" On the mural, a black sun was engraved. The ancient Inca people below were kneeling on the ground. Next to them was an image of an ancient person who looked like a sacrifice, with tears in his eyes. Song was behind the team. He looked at the team members surrounding the mural and did not say a word. He silently observed the surroundings and pressed his hand on his waist where the pistol was placed. "Teacher, what does the black sun mean?" Professor Dorowan frowned and said, "The Inca dynasty had their own worship. They worshipped the sun god, the guardian of the Inca Empire. In the Inca civilization, the sun god's name was Indi, the son of the god of creation, Viracocha. But Indi was the incarnation of the sun and should be a symbol of light. Why did the ancient Inca carve a black sun? I don't understand this either. But this discovery is probably a major discovery of the Inca civilization. Hurry up and record all the murals here. Remember, don't miss anything." Sangta was not interested in this kind of archaeological research. He was more interested in finding the wealth in the City of Gold. So, he looked at the other parts of the cave. Suddenly, Sangta stopped because he found some modern tools in the corner of the wall, a water bottle for outdoor use, a pair of hiking shoes, and a few bullet shells. Someone had been to this place earlier than them. Sangta suddenly thought of Song, the mysterious and capable guy. He remembered that when he was looking around, Song was beside him. So, he said, "Song, come and look at the things here." Song However, after Sang Ta shouted a few times, he did not get a response. He could not help but turn his head in confusion, only to find that Song had disappeared. At least, he was not in his line of sight. Sang Ta frowned. Not far away, Professor Dorowan and a group of people were busy recording information. The others in the team were assisting from the side and did not notice Sang Ta's actions. Song? Sang Ta called Song again. Suddenly, something flashed in front of his eyes. A black shadow. It was too fast. Sang Ta subconsciously fired a shot at the place where the black shadow had flashed past. The sound of the gunshot instantly alarmed everyone. What happened? Professor Dorowan asked in horror. Sang Ta replied loudly, I don't know, but there seems to be something here. He looked back at the team and shouted again, Everyone, be careful. There may be something dangerous hidden here. What's wrong with you? He saw that the team was looking at him with a frightened expression. Sang Ta frowned. When he realized what was going on, he broke out in cold sweat. He swallowed his saliva and slowly turned his head. In the darkness, he saw a pair of huge eyes staring at him. Hiss! What Sang Ta saw was a terrifyingly large, bloody mouth. It was actually an incomparably huge python. Its entire body was covered in black scales, and there was even a single blood-red horn on its head. By the time Sang Ta reacted, his vision had turned black. His entire upper body had been swallowed by the terrifying python. After swallowing half of Sang Ta's body, the black single-horned python raised its head and saw Sang Ta's legs struggling frantically in the python's mouth. In the end, they went limp. The python opened its mouth again and swallowed Sang Ta's whole body. At this moment, the archaeological team was in a complete panic. Chapter 9:15. They fled toward the exit of the cave in horror, ignoring the so-called important Incan cultural research materials, even though Professor Dorowan was yelling. However, the terrifying thing about the black unicorn python was that it was not only large enough to swallow a living person in one bite, but it could also crawl rapidly as its muscles contracted. In the blink of an eye, the black unicorn python was one step ahead of the fleeing archaeological team members. It appeared in front of the cave entrance and coiled its body around, staring at the archaeological team members with cold eyes. The archaeological team members, who were in charge of fighting, had no choice but to resist. They had seen what happened to their leader, Sang Ta, so no one wanted to be the next one to die in the mouth of the black unicorn python. Da-da-da-da! Pistols, machine guns, these were all provided by the sponsor. At this time, they were madly shooting at the black unicorn python. In the cave, the flashes of guns and cannons flashed. This monster! In the darkness, exclamations were heard, followed by screams. Another archaeological team member was targeted by the black unicorn python. His body was wrapped around by the black unicorn python's huge body, and in the midst of his painful screams, the sound of his bones breaking could be heard. However, the black unicorn python's skin seemed to be made of alloy, and the bullets only made tinkling sounds when they hit its body. Even if a few black scales fell off, it did not seem to hurt the black unicorn python at all. One by one, the archaeological team members became the black unicorn python's meal in fear. This seemed to be a punishment for all the intruders. Trembling and shivering, they were trapped on a small piece of ground, and the black unicorn python's body had circled them, completely encircling the archaeological team members. Are we going to die here? One of the archaeological team members couldn't bear the fear and knelt on the ground, crying. This was one of the few females in the archaeological team, and she was also Professor Dorowan's student. She sobbed softly. At this time, Song was still hiding behind the rock, observing the black unicorn python's every move, and he had no intention of helping. He was not cold-blooded, but he had a set of moral standards in his heart. Originally, in the village he grew up in, the idea of eliminating the weak and keeping the strong was instilled. Among the archaeological team, some were fugitives, and some had ulterior motives. Even Professor Dorwin had secretly embezzled his students' research results, and in the end, caused his student to commit suicide. Even Santa, this guy, had a habit of abusing children. Selecting these people was more of a hobby, a kind of alternative trial. The first expedition a few months ago was also done in the same way. Song had never thought of himself as a guardian of morality. He was just doing it on a whim. He did not feel guilty about killing people. He did not feel guilty about setting up a greedy archaeological team with all kinds of motive. He knew what he needed and what he should do to get what he needed. He did not plan to regret anything, even if the archaeological team in front of him was kind. Rabbits were kind-hearted, but they would eventually die in the mouth of a tiger. At this moment, the black single-horned python's eyes suddenly emitted a red light, like two resplendent gems. Under the illumination of the red light, the members of the archaeological team fell to the ground one after another. At this time, the python used its tail to roll everyone up. Last time, it also rolled everyone up like this. At this time, Song's heart beat fast because he keenly felt something. By following the black single-horned python like this, he would be able to obtain some secrets. The strange whisper in his mind became even more frequent, as if it was urging him to hurry up. A hint of excitement flashed in Song's eyes. He enjoyed this feeling of fear and trepidation. It was really too good. He could clearly feel the value of living more clearly than at any other time. He was like a moth attracted to a flame, instinctively chasing after excitement. The black single-horned python did not seem to notice that someone was following it. It just kept moving forward, and finally, its body began to drill into a dark hole. Song paced back and forth in front of the hole for a while, quietly listening. At this time, the whisper became clearer and clearer. It no longer sounded in his mind, but as if it came from the depths of the hole. Song's forehead could not help but drip with cold sweat, but his expression was so excited. He clutched his chest and took a deep breath. Then, he closed his eyes and stepped into the hole. He instantly felt his body sliding downwards at a rapid speed. This long hole was very smooth. The giant python probably often went in and out of this hole, as its hard scales had long polished the rock smooth. Song's eye silently counted in his heart. After counting to about 100, his body was thrown out from somewhere. Suddenly, an even more serious feeling of falling came over him. He hurriedly opened his eyes, only to see a flash of brilliance. The place where this hole led to was actually an underground natural pool. This pool was filled with a kind of algae that emitted a faint light, which illuminated the entire underground cavern with a faint blue light. In the center of this pool there was a temple-like building. This was a trapezoidal pyramid. Plop! Splash! At this time, Song's body was thrown into the pool, causing a burst of water. He quickly swam toward the pyramid in the center of the pool and climbed to the edge of the pyramid's platform. Song's eyes revealed a hint of joy. Nothing could make a person happier than discovering a treasured land after experiencing excitement and danger. For him, Song whistled, wringing the water stains on his body, and walked toward the entrance of the pyramid. But at this moment, he suddenly froze in front of the pyramid's entrance. When he looked up, he saw a pair of cold eyes staring at him. It was from the black single-horned python. This giant python was actually coiled around the pyramid's exterior, and the huge python's head was now in front of Song's eyes. Song took a deep breath, moved his heels back slightly, and at the same time, his throat trembled. However, this giant python did not seem to have any intention of opening its huge mouth to swallow Song. It just looked at him quietly, motionless. In the end, something that Song would never forget happened. This terrifying black single-horned python was gradually petrified. That's right, it coiled around the pyramid's exterior and completely turned into a huge stone. It constantly raised its head, looking forward like a guard. Song suddenly understood. This black single-horned python was most likely the guardian of this pyramid, but it did not attack him. Instead, it chose to turn into a stone statue. Does it want me to go in? Song calmed himself down. At this moment, the whisper in his heart could no longer be called a whisper, it was more like a call. But what about the members of the archaeological team who were captured by the giant python? Had they all been swallowed in such a short period of time? However, Song's doubts were soon solved, because he quickly found out where the members of the archaeological team were. They were actually inside this trapezoidal pyramid. Not only that, Song also saw a naked man inside the pyramid. This big man was moving the members of the archaeological team into a square pit. In front of this big pit there was a huge golden statue. The statue was inlaid with a large amount of gemstones and jadeite, and its body was made of gold. The moment Song saw this golden statue, he felt absent-minded. After the burly man placed the last member of the archaeological team into the square pit, he knelt on the ground and almost kissed the ground. He looked extremely humble. Next, the big man made a series of complicated movements, as if it was some kind of ritual. This big man was obviously worshipping the golden statue in front of him. At this time, Song had already taken out his pistol and pointed it at the man's back from afar. Then, he started to move around the man. He gradually saw the man's side profile. It was a face full of black tattoos. At this time, the naked big man slowly turned his neck, looking at Song. Song saw the pair of cold eyes on this big man's face. In an instant, Song felt like he saw a giant python staring at him. It was as if the black single-horned python had appeared in front of him. Inti, the big man's lips moved slightly. Song frowned and asked tentatively, Inti? Inti? The big man didn't say anything, but his eyes moved, looking at the golden statue in front of the huge pit, and uttered the same syllable again, Inti. It is Inti? Song couldn't help but point at the golden statue. At this time, the big man nodded slowly. Song thought to himself, this big man doesn't seem to have any intention to attack me, but why did he throw the members of the archaeological team into this pit? Were the people from the previous expedition also thrown into this pit in the end? Song tried to find some clues from this pit. These people didn't seem to be dead, they were just unconscious. But at this moment, the big man pointed at Song and then at the golden statue. Song was startled and subconsciously asked, You want me to walk in front of it? The big man nodded at this time. Song hesitated for a while, but in the end, he remained vigilant, staring at the big man's every move, and then slowly moved to the front of the golden statue. It's nothing. Song came to the front of the statue and quickly raised his head to take a few glances. Apart from the preciousness of this golden statue, there was nothing special about it. There was no danger here. Song had a keen intuition since he was young, especially when it came to danger. He would always do something on a whim, but because of that, he had escaped fatal danger several times. However, the big man just stared at Song silently, not saying anything. He even closed his eyes, as if he had turned into a statue. Song frowned, then his heart was moved, recalling the big man's previous actions. He had a good memory. He recalled the complicated hand gestures that the big man had made when he was kneeling. Then, according to the sequence, he slowly repeated them in front of the golden statue. However, after this set of hand gestures, there was still no change. This made Song even more confused. At this moment, the eyes of the golden statue opened abruptly. Yes, the eyeballs opened instantly. Song saw two pitch-black vortexes, which made him instinctively feel great danger. He even felt a chill run down his spine. Song subconsciously took a step back, but at this moment, he felt a sharp pain spread through his entire body. Song lowered his head to look at his chest. His chest had been pierced through from behind by a palm. Blood instantly dyed his chest red. Song was unable to breathe. He saw his own death in that instant. He couldn't hear anything, only a buzzing sound in his head. His vision gradually faded away, and his body was lifted up by the hand that had pierced through his chest from behind. He moved even closer to the golden statue. At this moment, something suddenly protruded from the chest of the golden statue. It was a small badge embedded on the chest of the statue. Countless whispers rang out in Song's mind. In addition to the pain he was feeling physically, he was also enduring the pain of his spirit being compressed. Inti! Song ran abruptly opened his eyes and screamed out the word in agony. Inti! Every time, such a call would ring out in his mind. Song Howren opened his eyes. There was still a huge wound on his chest. It was the result of the claws of the terrifying spider in the treasure room. Song Howren had fallen to the ground. He knew that he had died once. Yes, he had died once, but this was not the only time he had died. Back then, in the mysterious pyramid near the Golden Lake, he had died once. He was resurrected. After that, he returned to this world from the embrace of the god of death. Then, 2 years ago, he went out to sea. On the Caribbean Sea, his ship was suddenly sunk by pirates. He should have been buried in the sea, but in the end, he was only washed to the shore by the waves and then woke up. The Sun God's Badge. Song Howren knew that this was the Sun God's Badge, or rather, Inti, which gave him the power of resurrection. However, the source of this power was life. Those were the lives buried within the golden statue. It was unknown what kind of power they possessed, but they had completely tied their lives together with Song Howren's. Like the resurrection token, every time he died, the life tied to him would be consumed. At this moment, Song Howren felt an extraordinary power surging through his body. It was as though some kind of divine power had been added to his body. He fell to the ground and reached out with his hand. What he grabbed was an ancient treasure sword that had been hidden in the treasure room. It was the sword that had been tossed to the ground by Song San's grenade. Song Howren's speed instantly surpassed his own. Using both hands, he completely inserted the ancient treasure sword into the abdomen of the terrifying spider monster. At this moment, the body of the terrifying spider monster suddenly swelled gradually. It reached its limit and instantly exploded. An aura of flames burst out from the exploded spider monster's body. Chapter 9:16. In the vertical spiral staircase, a thrilling chase was playing out. The shadow moved in the darkness while Mr. Blind's ancient bronze sword moved in front of the shadow. Although Mr. Blind was called blind, it did not mean that he did not have the means to observe. As they jumped, a loud sound suddenly came from the bottom of the spiral staircase. The source seemed to be the treasure vault. Mr. Blind frowned. It was not that he did not think that the appearance of this strange shadow could be a diversion. However, he believed that Song Howren and Song San would be able to hold on for a while even if they encountered danger. On Song Howren's body, there was a power that even he was wary of. This was what he told Old Master Song about Song Howren's own destiny. At the same time, it was also the reason why he was unwilling to accept Song Howren as his disciple. Otherwise, Song Howren would be a very suitable seedling to cultivate his cultivation method. However, from the loud sound, it seemed that the situation was more serious than he had expected. Mr. Blind planned to see what the shadow's intentions were. One strike. After one strike, if the shadow still managed to escape, he would return. Hence, at this moment, the ancient bronze sword split into 7 sword light. Mr. Blind stretched his finger forward, and the 7 sword lights quickly pierced the wall. The first ray of sword light did not hit the shadow, but the next 6 rays of sword light instantly pierced to other places. Almost in an instant, the 7 rays of sword light that pierced to different places connected together, just like the star chart of the Big Dipper. On the wall, the area that was illuminated by the 7 sword lights was filled with a restraining power, trapping the shadow in an instant. The shadow struggled a few times but was unable to break through the seal of the sword lights. In the end, Mr. Blind snorted and formed a sword seal with his fingers. He pointed forward again. A muffled groan came from the darkness. A pool of blood was left on the wall. Then, a shadow fell and landed on the stairs. Chee-chee, chee-chee. 7 beams of sword light descended in an instant, landing directly around the figure, forming a circle. Lightning flashed between the beams of sword light. The figure hurriedly got up, but was immediately struck by the lightning, and a series of painful sounds rang out. Mr. Blind quickly walked over and suddenly asked, "What is your purpose in luring me out?" The sword lights flashed and the shadow's appearance became clear. She held her shoulder with one hand. Blood flowed out from between her fingers. That was where she had been stabbed. Her drooping hair covered half of her face. There were still traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. However, she turned her face away. She did not intend to speak and only snorted coldly. "Female." Mr. Blind's brows furrowed and he suddenly said, "You are not human." The woman still did not respond. Mr. Blind pondered for a moment, then took out a small wooden sword that was only as long as a finger from his sleeve, and flicked it forward. The small wooden sword pierced into the woman's body, but she didn't feel any unusual pain. She only felt as if something had entered her body. She lowered her head slightly. Then, she abruptly raised her head. There was a trace of fear on her face. Mr. Blind said indifferently, "I can hear the source of your power. It seems to be coming from your heart. You should be a vampire. The heart is your biggest weakness. What I implanted in you is the binding sword. It hangs above your heart at all times. I only need to think about it and the wooden sword will pierce your heart." The woman clenched her teeth. In the end, she unwillingly turned her face away. After the wooden sword entered her body, not only did it take control of her life, it even cut off the source of her power, making her feel extremely weak at this moment. The place where she was originally injured was now filled with bone-piercing pain. It was as if the vampire's self-healing ability had been sealed. "Follow me." Mr. Blind turned around and left. The 7 sword lights retracted and fused into one. It turned back into the bronze sword. It rotated in the air once before returning to Mr. Blind's side. The woman clenched her teeth. In the end, she struggled to get up. She slowly followed this abnormally powerful human. Since there were 13 clans in this world, and there was also the Magicians' Association, it meant that there were many life forms with extraordinary powers in this world. Turning over his arm, the golden arm gradually returned to its original appearance. At this time, Song Howren also slightly sighed. This powerful force had completely calmed down in his body at this time. This was a mysterious force that didn't listen to his command. It would only suddenly appear at the critical moment to save him. Song Howren looked down at the sun god's badge on his body. He slowly uttered a syllable, "Inti." His call didn't bring any response. Song Howren shook his head, and quickly picked up the equipment on the ground. When he picked up the flashlight and explored forward, he found that the small spiders had begun to retreat. The crisis was finally over. Song Howren quickly picked up the pistol. Using the flashlight's light source, he shot at the strands of spider silk that were hanging people up. However, he didn't intend to break the spider silk. He only aimed at the place where the spider silk came into contact with the rock. He caught the people one by one and put them on the ground. However, it took Song Howren a lot of effort to save them one by one. However, he couldn't cut off the spider silk that wrapped around them. While Song Howren was trying to come up with a solution, he suddenly heard the faint sound of footsteps. He immediately turned around and saw Mr. Blind slowly walking out of the treasury's door. "Great!" Song Howren revealed a bright smile. The spider silk on Luvia and the others had been cut off by Mr. Blind with the ancient bronze sword. Mr. Blind had also finished listening to Song Howren's story about the appearance of the giant spider. According to Song Howren, he had placed the bomb into the giant spider's mouth and had it swallow it before blowing it to smithereens. This seemed to be the most simple and commonly used method for ordinary people to deal with monsters. At first glance, there was nothing wrong with it. However, after Mr. Blind finished listening to his story, He quietly looked at Song Howren. Even though Mr. Blind's eyes were closed, Song Howren had a feeling that he was being watched by something. It made him feel somewhat unnatural. "Eldest young master is blessed with great fortune," Mr. Blind said indifferently. "As the saying goes, those who survive a great disaster are bound to have good fortune later on. It is fortunate." "Ha ha, that's good." Song Howren smiled in embarrassment. Then, he asked with concern, "Mister, how are they? Are their lives in danger?" Mr. Blind said indifferently, "Judging from their pulse, there is no danger to their lives. The spider that eldest young master mentioned must have injected them with a nerve-paralyzing poison. That is why they fell unconscious. Feed them these first and see if there is any effect." Mr. Blind pulled out a small porcelain bottle from the pocket of his tang suit. There had always been a saying in the village that Mr. Blind's products were of high quality. Song Howren was overjoyed as he took it and quickly fed everyone one by one. "By the way, mister, what is the background of this woman?" Song Howren stared at the woman who had followed Mr. Blind over. She was injured, but her eyes were cold. She continued to stare without saying anything. "She should be a vampire," Mr. Blind said indifferently. "I believe her power should be to transform herself into a shadow. She is good at hiding." Song Howren immediately became vigilant. Mr. Blind said, "Her power has been sealed. For now, she is not a threat. However, this woman is stubborn. I fear she will not speak easily." Song Howren suddenly said, "Mister, you are saying that she no longer has any ability to resist?" Mr. Blind nodded his head. Song Howren suddenly smiled wickedly and said, "Mister, can you hand her over to me so that I can ask her?" Mr. Blind was startled. Then, he nodded his head in agreement. This woman was completely under his control. Her life and death could be decided with a single thought from him. She was not in any danger. Song Howren whistled and walked towards the woman. At the same time, he looked her up and down. The woman looked at him silently without any intention of retreating. Even when Song Howren was about to touch her body, she did not move. Song Howren reached out his hand and lifted the woman's chin. Like a frivolous wastrel, he asked, "Miss, what is your name?" However, the woman did not speak. Song Howren asked the same question in several different languages. In the end, he asked in Arabic. Only then did the woman frown. Song Howren observed very carefully. He knew that the woman could understand Arabic. He continued, "Beauty, do you know? If a man wants a woman to let go of her mouth, there are many ways." She finally opened her mouth and sneered, "Do you dare? I am a vampire. Aren't you afraid that I will bite you and turn you into a monster? Don't you know that in this world there is something called a mouth ball? Are you stupid?" Song Howren stroked the woman's earlobe with his finger and said softly, "I know a few tribal chiefs. They more or less have some strange hobbies, for example, training beauties." These words moved her slightly. She looked a little flustered. Mr. Blind, who had poor eyesight but excellent hearing, quickly shook his head. Everything about this young master Song was good, but his temperament was a little evil. Mr. Blind simply sat down on the spot and pretended that he did not hear anything. Since he had handed this captive over to Song Howren, he would not say anything else. As a rancor, he still had this bit of pride. Seeing the woman's flustered expression, Song Howren said, "Ayaya, it's good to not have the ability to resist. I like to do whatever I want." Song Howren used his invasive gaze to size up the woman's entire body. Then, he started to walk around her. His fingers would suddenly touch the woman's body occasionally and gently draw a line across it. She finally could not help but say, "Humph, incompetent person, is this the only way to show your superiority? How pitiful." "No, no, no, this has nothing to do with being incompetent." Song Howren suddenly grabbed her shoulder from behind and pulled her whole body to his side. He said with a light smile, "It's that I can do whatever I want to you, but you can't do anything to me. This is very exciting. Yes, I think I should customize a special set of clothes for you. Say, tail, what kind of material should we use to make it feel like a dog's tail? The woman's eyes were even more confused. Song Howren's finger touched her spine and then slowly moved down. He said with a wicked smile, "You know what? People can actually stick things like tails, and there are very suitable places to stick them. For example, the next place." His finger had already touched the place between her waist and buttocks and was still moving down slowly. "Gloria!" She hurriedly said a name, but she could not see the smug smile on Song Howren's face behind her. "What's your purpose?" Song Howren whispered in Gloria's ear. But his finger just stopped and did not let go. It was between her groin. Gloria pursed her lips and was unwilling to let go. Song Howren was not in a hurry. He suddenly said, "Oh, by the way, actually I have some personal hobbies. I prefer bald women. When I look at your long hair, I have a strong desire to shave it off. What do you think about putting your bald head on the oil pipe?" "Bald head, yo, investigator. I'm an investigator. This time, I'm only investigating the castle. We suspect that this incident was caused by some undisciplined vampires." She finished her sentence in one breath. Mr. Blind looked up and suddenly said, "You're a member of the 13 Clans Supervisory Organization?" Gloria had no choice but to nod. Mr. Blind said, "Young Master Song, let her go. That's enough for us to know." Although Song Howren was surprised, he did not refute. He just nodded and really let go of Gloria and left. But before leaving, Song Howren lightly patted Gloria's perky butt and laughed softly. "Aya, what a pity." Gloria suddenly shivered. She felt that her pores opened up a lot. Bald head, tail, and so on. Song Howren was about to ask Mr. Blind about the 13 clans. But at this time, he did not know where the chaotic sound came from. It was a walkie-talkie that fell on the ground. Song Howren quickly picked up the walkie-talkie and heard Song Da's voice. Old 3, young master? Young master?" "Mr. Song Da received." Song Howren replied. Song Da said, "Young master, after we cleared a few waves of zombies, we found a place similar to a laboratory. But this place has been severely damaged. We only found a relatively intact hard disk and nothing else. Do you want to continue exploring?" Song Howren thought for a while and said, "On the way, did you see any survivors?" Although it had been a few days and they were still in the cellar maze full of zombies, the chance of survival was very small. But Song Howren still asked, "Did not encounter any." Song Howren nodded and then looked at Gloria, who was listening attentively. He suddenly said, "Got it? You guys go back the way you came. This mission is cancelled." Even though Luvia and the others had taken Mr. Blind's pills, they didn't seem to have recovered. They had to leave immediately. That was what Song Howren thought. Mr. Blind did not have any opinion on this. Soon after, Song Da and the others went back the way they came. After some discussion, everyone began to evacuate this place. Before leaving, Mr. Blind set up a so-called barrier to protect this treasure house. Next, the Song family's people just need to empty this place. This exploration ended. Song Howren brought back a female vampire, Gloria. Yen PS1. Thank you to the Tang Shi Tian In for bowing to the forces of capitalism. Chapter 9:17. It was a rainy night. Holding a black umbrella, Mr. Orphy glanced at the light in front of the gate, and then walked in without saying a word. This was a secret office of the department Mr. Orphy was in charge of. From the outside it looked like a high-end apartment building, but there was something else inside. The lights in the corridor were dim because they had not been changed for a long time. Water dripped from the tip of the umbrella, forming an intermittent line of water droplets. There were also wet footprints. He opened a door and walked in. Then he opened the cabinet on the wall, entered the hidden elevator, and finally came to the office in the basement of the apartment building. The bright light immediately made Mr. Orphy's depressed mood better, and the busy working environment of a large number of security personnel also refreshed him. "Sir." The secretary had been waiting at the entrance for a long time. Mr. Orphy nodded at this time, took off his windbreaker, and walked into his office. Mr. Orphy had to work overtime tonight, so after a press conference, he hurried home for dinner, and then accompanied his son for a while before rushing here. There was an urgent document on his desk. Mr. Orphy had already known the general content of this document on the way here, but he still carefully read it again. After that, Mr. Orphy frowned, and the secretary had to wait with bowed head. Mr. Orphy folded his hands, leaned back on the chair, and looked at the light above his head. The document was sent by the president. The reason was that the government of a neighboring country had sent a complaint to them. This was a diplomatic issue. Zombie bath salts, a new drug originated from the country where Mr. Orphy was from. This kind of thing had caused an uproar in the neighboring country a few days ago. A large number of people who took this drug were found in the hospital. The casualties were heavy and it caused a huge social harm. In order to eliminate this sin, they hope that we can cooperate to crack down on the source of the zombie bath salts and push the responsibility to us. Mr. Orphy sighed slowly. Behind the scenes of this country, are all a bunch of idiots? How can they make such a ridiculous statement? Sir, they have caused public opinion in the country. The secretary said helplessly. The starting point is actually very simple. If they don't shirk the responsibility, it will greatly affect the credibility of the local government. Furthermore, this kind of thing indeed first appeared on our side. Mr. Orphy suddenly sneered. They are a big country that produces poison themselves. How dare they say that? What did our informant say? The secretary said, they went to the hospital to investigate, but the hospital has been sealed off by the local government and the military. Entry and exit are very strict. Therefore, our men did not find anything special for the time being. However, we did find out that many corpses were transported out of the hospital that day. Also, it seems like a big tree suddenly appeared. Big tree. Then he disappeared again. The secretary shrugged and said, I feel that this incident is not simply caused by drugs. There must be some inside story. Mr. Orphy massaged his shoulders and said, Since you're in such a hurry to push the blame, it naturally means something. It's just that when I see this presidential order, I get a headache. Mr. President, what do you mean? Mr. Orphy sighed. It's almost time for the election. The secretary seemed to understand something and his face was solemn. Then, what do we need to do? Mr. Orphy thought for a moment and said, Give some information to the drug investigation team. First, do as Mr. President wants. Since he made this decision, he should have discussed it with someone. The secretary nodded. According to the information, this zombie bath salts came from a woman, but we still don't know who the source of the salts is. And the identity of this woman, who is responsible for providing the goods to the seller, is also very mysterious. Give me as much information about this woman as you can. Mr. Orphy waved his hand. Understood. The secretary immediately agreed. Is there anything else? Mr. Orphy raised his head at this time. I want to make a few phone calls. The secretary said at this time, there is such a thing. Recently, a new religious group has suddenly appeared. They believe in something like God Baki. And it seems that many people have joined, and most of them are rich. Sir, I'm afraid this group will cause a big problem in the long run. Mr. Orphy was expressionless and said indifferently, I know. About this new religious group, it's not like it hasn't happened before. This kind of guy can't cause a big problem. Let's put this matter aside first. Our priority now is to deal with this document from Mr. President. The secretary nodded and felt that it was right, so he directly walked out of Mr. Orphy's office. Mr. Orphy rubbed his eyebrows and his face became gloomy. God Baki? This guy, didn't I say not to be so flamboyant? If it goes on like this, even I will. But when he thought of Dr. Frankie's survival, Mr. Orphy had another headache. Mr. Orphy shook his head hard and began to concentrate on his work. But he suddenly remembered the ability of the messenger of God Baki to rise and give blessings. He couldn't help but feel a little touched. A strange tree that suddenly appeared and suddenly disappeared. A guy that attacked people like a zombie in a movie. Is there a real zombie? It seemed that it was necessary to meet the messenger of God in person. Mr. Orphy made the decision reluctantly. Just as Mr. Orphy was distressed, the messenger of God, who he called a troublesome guy, was playing a happy game in a villa. 4 coquettish women wearing only underwear were playing in the room at this time, while the messenger of God covered his eyes and began to play a game of catching people. Of course, the punishment came. Recently, the messenger of God felt that his energy was really endless. Paradise of beauty, the messenger of God. Buggy thought so. Suddenly, Buggy pounced out and really did let him pounce on a woman. The two fell on the bed in an instant, and Buggy happily moved his hands up and down. But he soon felt that something was wrong. The reason was that the woman he pounced on didn't have the reaction he expected. Instead, she was motionless. Buggy felt as if he had just touched an empty shell. Buggy was stunned and quickly took off the blindfold. The blindfold was on his mask. He later bought a mask that wouldn't fall off easily from the black maid, which was convenient for his daily disguise. For this, he painfully paid a lot of units of faith. Oh, it's the beautiful and noble Miss Yu Yi. Buggy clearly saw the situation in the room at this time. The 4 women's bodies were completely stiff, as if time had been taken away. In the room, the maid in a black dress was smiling. Buggy quickly climbed down from the bed. On the floor covered with soft white carpet, Buggy raised his head and quickly crawled to Yu Yi, his eyes full of greed. He didn't greedily look at Yu Yi, the beautiful person, but at the thing in Yu Ye's hand, the meal plate. The meal plate was covered, but Buggy could already smell the smell of something on the plate that could arouse him no matter how many women he had. Meat. Buggy didn't think that he was a greedy person. He thought that playing with women was the happiest thing. But now, compared to playing with women, it seemed that there was a fatal hobby that overrode it. That was eating meat. Eating meat, eating meat, eating meat, eating meat, eating meat, eating meat made by Yu Yi. After eating it, he would feel extremely comfortable and full of strength. Do you want to eat? Miss Maid smiled slightly. Like a dog, Buggy crawled on the ground with his hands supporting his body. At the same time, he raised his head, opened his mouth, licked his lips, and kept nodding. 50 units, Miss Maid said softly. Buggy agreed without hesitation, almost without much consideration. With the increase of believers, his daily income of faith was constantly increasing. Not to mention 50 units, even if it was 500 units, he could afford it. Deal. Miss Maid smiled slightly. Under Yu Ye's smile, Buggy was like a lost person who saw water in the desert. He watched without blinking as Miss Maid slowly uncovered the lid on the silver meal plate. Inside was brown muscle tissue, and dark green blood oozed out. This portion of meat was raw and had not been processed in any way. Yu Yi flipped her palm and poured the meat on the plate. Buggy quickly reached out to catch it, and then directly stuffed it into his mouth, wolfing it down. But the blood still dripped from his fingers, but Buggy didn't let it go. He lowered his head and began to lick these fish that escaped the net. Looking at such an unbearable Buggy, Yu Yi chuckled at this time. What an insatiable child. Delicious. Delicious. More, I need more. Then please earn more faith. Miss Maid's voice was full of supreme temptation. I earn. Delicious. Delicious. I earn. Buggy had fallen into a state of fanaticism, like those believers who would sacrifice themselves for his blessing. What an obedient child. Miss Maid nodded with satisfaction. At this time, behind Buggy, a faintly discernible shadow was slowly becoming clear. No wonder Lucifer gave you the highest level of contract. Mammon, the legendary greedy demon. He didn't know when Miss Maid had left, but she had taken 50 units of faith with her this time. In the room, the 4 girls hadn't recovered yet, only Buggy was still crazily chewing the meat on the ground. After leaving the villa, Yu Yi glanced at the rainy night, whispering, "I wonder if Master has eaten supper. It's so boring." When did the feeling of boredom appear? Pa! The door opened instantly. When it opened, the servants stood in 2 rows in the hall, and said in unison, "Welcome home, Miss Ing, welcome home, Master Chiu." Song Ing was in a good mood at this time, directly saying that everyone would get a red packet, becoming a girl who distributed wealth. It was the 6th day after that incident. After various checks and the manipulation of the Song family, Luochio and the others were able to leave the hospital. "You're back." Song Tianyu walked out with a walking stick, his face full of smiles. Master Song dismissed the servants who lined up to welcome them, and then said, "I asked the kitchen to prepare some nourishing food, it's almost time to eat." "I'm going to take a bath, Grandpa. Let's meet in the dining hall." Song Ing waved her hand and walked directly to her room. Master Song looked at her affectionately, and then said to Luochio, "Child, I didn't expect that you would encounter such a thing as soon as you returned to the Song family. Are you scared?" "It's an unforgettable experience." Luochio smiled. "Your complexion looks really good." "Not bad, not bad." Master Song nodded, and then said, "Come, before dinner, follow me to the morning hall to burn incense for our ancestors, and tell them that you're back safely." He didn't call Song Ing. Although Song Tianyu liked his granddaughter very much, in essence, he still valued boys more than girls. The morning hall had always been a place where females rarely stepped into, it was more for males. Luochu felt that there was no problem, so he didn't refuse. He followed Master Song's footsteps, and came to the morning hall for the 2nd time. However, what surprised Luochio was that he saw someone in the morning hall who wasn't a male member of the Song family. Mr. Blind. Seeing that Mr. Blind turned around, Luochio said thoughtfully, "Master Song, it doesn't seem to be as simple as burning incense." Song Tianyu was stunned by Luochio's polite greeting, but he didn't care too much. Instead, he slowly said, "Yes, that's right. This time, other than burning incense for our ancestors, there's another matter. That is, Mr. Blind wants to meet with you." After pausing for a moment, Song Tianyu continued, "Originally, I should have arranged for you to meet earlier. However, it was inconvenient in the hospital. Secondly, Mr. Blind had other things to do these few days, so it was delayed until today." What Mr. Blind had to do was naturally to explore the ancient castle's underground cellar. Luochio nodded at Mr. Blind. He didn't care if Mr. Blind could see him, as long as he was polite enough. He walked past Mr. Blind, and came in front of the memorial tablet in the morning hall. Fifth uncle brought over the prepared sandalwood incense. Luochio bowed 3 times before inserting the incense into the incense burner. At this moment, Mr. Blind suddenly said, "Young Master Luochio, do you know that every time you bow, the Song family's providence increases crazily?" Luochio slowly turned around. Mr. Blind faced Luochio and said seriously, "Young Master Luochio, when you bowed 3 times to the ancestors, the Song family's providence increased. After 3 bows, the providence has more than doubled from yesterday." "Providence, what is that?" Luochio blinked and asked curiously, "Is it a matter of feng shui?" At this moment, Mr. Blind suddenly opened his closed eyes. The moment his turbid eyeballs appeared, he immediately closed them. Mr. Blind took a small step back. He took a deep breath and cupped his fists, saying, "There seems to be a great momentum behind you. It was Qing Xiazi who offended you, please forgive me." Master Song was so shocked by Mr. Blind's attitude that he couldn't close his mouth. Yen 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 yen.